With one final desperate effort, the young warrior plunged his radiant blade into the massive, skull-helmed beast. Nearby, the wounded Demon King watched in stunned silence, unable to grasp how a complete stranger had managed to defeat him. Standing over his defeated opponent, Clares responded to a weak inquiry about his identity. Despite the power still surging through his green cloak, he claimed to be nothing more than a simple villager who once served as a porter for the hero's party. With a final heavy thud, the massive beast collapses, ending its reign of terror and leaving Clay standing alone amidst the wreckage as the silent victor. As he lay dying, the Demon King began to chuckle at the sheer absurdity of his situation, finding it ironic that his end came from a mere villager rather than a holy knight. With a bloody grin, he looked up at the young warrior and asked if he had anything left to say. But Clay, his face cold and caked in grime, shot back by asking if the Demon King was the one who needed to offer his final words. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Clay raised his sword and delivered a swift, decisive strike that silenced the Demon King forever, while a blonde-haired youth nearby watched in horror as his companion collapsed. Surveying the wreckage, the blonde man's gaze settled on the beast's massive foot before he turned toward Clay, muttering in total disbelief. Yuka calls out to Clay, asking if the Demon King has truly been defeated, prompting Clay to turn with a relieved smile as he calls Yuka's name, glad to see him finally awake. However, just as he begins to relax, the sword in his hand suddenly starts to crackle and fracture. Yuka's eyes widened in shock as he recognized the weapon as his holy sword, Aaron's veil. Looking down at the crumbling blade, Clay apologized, explaining that he had borrowed it without permission after his own sword shattered. Stunned by the explanation, Yuka realizes that wielding the holy sword should be impossible for anyone outside the Altonia royal family. This leads him to a startling theory. Could this simple luggage carrier be a secret member of the royal bloodline, or perhaps even his own brother? As he tried to return the holy sword, the blade suddenly flared with divine energy, scorching Clay's hand. He recoiled in pain, pulling back his burnt fingers while Yuka watched the scene unfold in shock. Gazing at the sword's lingering glow, Yuka identified the blade as Aaron's veil, noting that its aggressive reaction was likely a safeguard against the Demon King's remaining forces. This confirmed the weapon's true intent, leaving Clay to nurse his throbbing hand as the reality of Yuka's warning finally set in. Momentarily setting aside his own pain, Clay's expression softened as he reflected on their progress, noting that 3 of the Demon King's 4 elite heavenly kings had already been defeated. Looking off into the distance, Yuka explained that the Demon King's personal skill was the ultimate threat, and with him gone, the rest of the army would likely crumble. This unique skill, known as Ruler of Demons, granted the Demon King the authority to empower and command a vast legion of monsters. Standing among the remains of the Demon King's fortress, the gravity of the situation finally set in. With the Dark Ruler gone and no heir to take his place, their victory was now absolute. He listened in silence, his expression remaining unreadable as he surveyed the desolate landscape. His companion, Yuka, lightened the heavy atmosphere with a casual stretch, noting that their long quest to defeat the Demon King felt surprisingly underwhelming. Clay was quick to counter, reminding him of the grueling struggles and near-death experiences he had faced along the way. Yuka conceded with a smile, reminding Clay that he was the hero who had defeated the Demon King, a direct compliment that left him visibly flustered. His expression softened as he remembered advocating for Clay to join the royal party, despite the heavy skepticism of his advisors. One woman in particular had questioned the inclusion of a common villager, a doubt that Yuka admitted he had shared at the time. Returning to the present, he looked down at Clay, who was now kneeling before him. Looking toward his companion, he confirmed that the prophecy was indeed correct, and that Clares was the true hero. Clay, his face covered in grime and weariness, could only stammer in shock, questioning how someone like him could possibly hold such a title. Dismissing his companion's shock, he playfully remarked that Clay would be celebrated as a hero upon their return and should start drafting a speech, though he noted they first needed to wake Laura and Tiritas, a suggestion that caused a flustered Clay to shout back in refusal. Following the Demon King's defeat, the group arrived at a magnificent castle, where King Zalgodo of Altonia stood atop a high balcony to announce the return of his son, Yuka, and his companions, commending them for their noble achievements. Watching from the sidelines, Prime Minister G. Conrad smirked, seemingly incredulous that they had actually managed to defeat the Demon King. Inside the throne room, King Zalgotho announced to the gathered crowd that the hero's party would be properly rewarded, while the four companions knelt respectfully before him. While they remained kneeling, G. Conrad leaned in to whisper that Lady Flora and Lord Taritas had been quite busy, hinting that the line of succession would be at risk if Prince Yuka took credit for the victory, a revelation that left Clay visibly shaken. The Prime Minister's inner monologue exposed his scheme. He believed that since there were no witnesses to the Demon King's defeat, he could easily strip Yuka of the credit and reassign the achievement to his own companions. Meanwhile, Tarid admitted with a self-deprecating smile that he was knocked unconscious almost immediately, while Flora conceded that she had also been unable to provide any assistance during the fight against the Demon King. Dressed in a white uniform, a knight knelt before the throne to deliver his official report regarding the one who had finally slain the Demon King. However, as he spoke, the king and prime minister's expressions shifted from eager anticipation to complete disbelief. A voice rang out through the night, identifying the figure as Lord Yuka and sending a shockwave through the entire court. Clay watched in bewilderment as the king, Jig, Flora, and Tiritas all reacted with expressions of stunned disbelief. He listened in stunned silence as the knight's testimony unfolded. The man claimed that despite hiding in terror, he clearly saw Lord Yuka slay the Demon King. To prove it, he gestured toward the corpse, stating that an examination would confirm it was struck down by Aaron's veil, a holy sword only those with royal blood can wield. Even Prince Yuka was left completely confused by the unexpected claim. Infuriated by the obvious lie, Aintus Flora lashed out, questioning why he would claim credit when Yuka was the one who truly defeated the Demon King. She warned him that he couldn't take back his words now, as doing so would contradict the king's decree. But Yuka quickly stepped in to calm her down, suggesting there must be a reason for the deception. As she fumed, he turned toward Clay with a forced laugh, remarking that it was shameful to credit his own achievements to someone else. He admitted the lie was troubling and had caused him concern, yet he insisted there must be a reason for it, while Clay remained silent with an unreadable expression. Clay finally spoke up, suggesting that given Duke Conrad's recent actions, it would be best to attribute the Demon King's defeat to Yuka. This proposal stunned both Yuka and Flora, while the prince was left questioning why the Duke was even being mentioned. Watching from a nearby seat, Sage Tiritas interjected with a knowing smile, asking Clay for clarification even though he had already pieced everything together. He correctly deduced that Yuka wasn't the true hero, and that Clay had only orchestrated the lie to safeguard the prince's position. He proceeded to detail the kingdom's political landscape, explaining that Duke Conrad held the true power while Clay remained at his beck and call. Furthermore, he noted that Yuka's older brother, Prince Alton, was currently first in line for the throne. Tarid further observed that this major accomplishment significantly bolstered Yuka's claim to the throne, a shift in power that Duke Conrad would surely find unsettling. He finished his explanation, pointing out to a stunned Yuka that if the report had truthfully named Clay as the winner, the Duke would have been thrilled for the chance to discredit the prince and diminish his standing at court. Clay then explained his true intentions, knowing that if he claimed the glory himself, Duke Conrad would only squander it for personal gain. By placing the achievement in Yuka's hands instead, it becomes a vital asset for his path to the throne. With a gentle smile, Clay shared his conviction that under Yuka's rule, the kingdom could finally become a place where everyone lives in peace. Flora's frustration vanished once she realized his intentions were noble, and she agreed to let the matter rest. Turning to Yuka, she acknowledged the strain he had been under for Clay's sake and pledged her full support to him. Yuka accepted her help, promising to give it his all, before asking Clay what he planned to do next. He began explaining that there was a specific idea he had been eager to put to the test for some time. Regarding his future, he announced his plan to pioneer the borderlands, a demonic territory notorious for being the most dangerous place in the world. The announcement left his companions speechless, and Tiritas, wide-eyed with disbelief, shouted the word borderlands in shock. By pressing his seal into the clay, he acknowledged the immense danger of the borderlands, a frontier overrun by formidable demons. Tiritas then cited an ancient law. Anyone who successfully develops that territory through their own merit is granted full ownership of the land. This standing offer existed only because the kingdom had long ago abandoned the treacherous, undeveloped region. Gesturing toward a map of the Albania kingdom, he pointed out that while the law was officially on the books, no one had ever actually succeeded in the task, a fact Clay calmly confirmed from across the room. Clay smiled and brushed off the idea of a grand scheme, explaining that since well-known figures often struggled to find peace in the kingdom, he wanted to create a sanctuary where everyone could truly relax. While Flora realized his underlying goal was to secure his own territory, Clay pointed out that his specialized abilities made him the perfect candidate to settle the dangerous borderlands. Within the castle walls, Clay's companions gathered to discuss his departure. Flora appeared resigned, admitting she wouldn't try to stop him if his mind was made up. Yuka offered his unwavering support, promising to stand by Clay even if his journey took him to the treacherous borderlands. Meanwhile, a downcast Tarita confessed that things would feel incredibly lonely once he was gone. Clearly touched by their concern, he felt a reassuring hand settle on his shoulder and give it 2 supportive pats. The peaceful atmosphere is abruptly shattered as officials burst in with urgent summons. Lord Yuka is called to handle diplomatic arrangements. Lady Flora is needed for a pilgrimage ritual, and Lord Tiritas must discuss a Magic Academy recommendation, leaving the 3 heroes completely overwhelmed by their sudden new responsibilities. As they were led away, Clay reflected on the hardships of heroism. Once dismissed, they let out a sigh over the exhausting conversation, realizing that everyone's schedule was about to become much more hectic. While his friends were occupied, Clay departed from the castle alone, casting one final look back before heading across the vast, empty courtyard. As he walks away, he reflects on being a simple villager whose journey has concluded. He wonders if he should have given a formal goodbye, but dismisses the idea, figuring the others are too busy with their new duties. The uncertainty of when he might see them again weighs heavily on his mind. Memories of their recent journey flooded his mind, recalling the laughter they shared, quiet nights by the campfire, and their many training sessions. A sharp pang of loneliness struck him as he realized how distant those moments already felt, even though it wasn't long ago that they were inseparable. Stopping in the middle of a field, he gazed away with a somber expression, completely unaware that Flora, Yuka, and Tiritas were watching him from just a short distance away. Noticing his friend's melancholy, Tarita watched as Clay suddenly spun around in shock upon hearing them. Clay stammered, questioning why they were there, but Tarita simply smiled and explained that they had come to see him off. Before he can react, Flora and Tiritas rush forward to pull him into a tight embrace, while Yuko watches the reunion in stunned surprise as they comfort a tearful Clay. He returned the embrace with a bittersweet smile, thanking his companions and wishing for their continued safety. His friends watched them depart, their faces reflecting a bittersweet mix of sadness and silent understanding. With their goodbyes concluded, he set off on his solitary journey, leaving the capital behind as the others waved from the road. Traversing rugged mountain ridges and dense forests, he spent his days on the move and his nights resting at camp. As he traveled, he gauged his progress and realized he was still 2 days from the borderlands. But his focus was shattered when a sudden scream echoed through the woods, forcing him to turn in alarm. He quickly identified the source of the disturbance just off the path, where a pack of monstrous wolves had cornered a covered wagon as a lone young man stood guard over the panicked horses. He rushed toward the conflict, recognizing the beasts as forest wolves while gathering wind magic in his palm, which caught the struggling driver's attention. Shouting as he cast the spell, he sent a flurry of invisible razor-sharp wind blades slicing through the pack of wolves. The skirmish concluded in an instant, as the creature collapsed where it stood, leaving the driver speechless while Clay landed gracefully and checked to see if he was unharmed. With the danger behind them and the travelers safe, The wagon's wheels began to roll once more as they resumed their journey through the forest. As their wagon travels along a country road, the young driver expresses his deep gratitude for the rescue, only for Clay to insist that he's the one who's truly thankful for the lift. The man introduces himself as Glans, a merchant from Emeru village, before presenting his daughter, Rita, who offers her own polite thanks for Clay's help. During their journey, Glans explains that they are returning from a supply run to the capital, and asks Clay why he's traveling through such a remote region, to which Clay responds by acknowledging Emeru village as the settlement closest to the borderlands. He explained that he had matters to attend to in the borderlands and asked Glans for information about the territory, a destination that clearly stunned both the merchant and his daughter. The merchant offered a smile, suggesting that seeing it firsthand would be much faster than any explanation, leaving Clay visibly confused. Elsewhere, in a much more lavish setting, a man with long, tied-back hair speaks to Prince Yuka, who remains composed while sipping his tea, seemingly indifferent to the man's arrival. Lowering his cup with a placid smile, he acknowledged the rarity of the visit and asked the man what he needed. Duke Conrad steps forward to offer his formal congratulations on the Demon King's defeat, remarking on the king's inevitable pride. While he hails Yuka as a savior, his tone shifts as he admits to having one pressing concern. His cheerful demeanor quickly faded, replaced by a sharp, serious gaze as he prepared to address the prince directly. He catches the prince off guard by questioning if Yuka actually defeated the Demon King, causing the royal's composure to break into a tense smile as he asks what would lead the duke to raise such a doubt. He requested the final appraisal, pointing out that the wounds on the Demon King's corpse were caused by his holy sword, a fact Duke Conrad confirmed, agreeing that His Majesty had indeed slain the creature. The Duke's expression shifts into a confident smirk as he questions whether the body truly belonged to the Demon King, noting that he has nothing more to say on the matter. Turning his back, he voiced his suspicions, pointing out that since no one knows the Demon King's true face, the prince might have simply killed a random traveler to pass off as his fallen enemy. When they met again, the Duke addressed the prince with a patronizing air, suggesting that while he didn't doubt his achievements, it would be best to provide evidence of the power needed to slay the Demon King. Bristling at the demand, the prince questioned how he could offer proof, mockingly asking if he was expected to summon another Demon King. In response, Duke Conrad calmly proposed a mock battle against 3 S-rank adventurers. He eagerly suggested turning the match into a grand public event, a sensible proposal, considering S-rank adventurers are said to rival entire armies, making a victory over 3 of them a simple feat for someone of his caliber. Despite his outward appearance, his inner thoughts reveal a much harsher reality. He realizes that a humiliating defeat would shatter his reputation, forcing him to begrudgingly admit that Conrad's assessment was correct. He lacks the strength to overcome the Demon King. Sensing this hesitation, the Duke assures him that he is perfectly fine with the situation. With his resolve strengthening, the prince explained that he carried the legacy of a hero inherited from a friend and refused to be moved by such a dull tactic, leading him to firmly accept the proposal. As their journey finally comes to an end, Glans announces their arrival and tells Clay to see for himself, leaving Clay stunned by the sight before him. Staring at the massive, twisted tangle of blackened thorns and roots, he stood paralyzed, unable to find words for the corrupt energy pulsating before him. He traveled by wagon across an open field, following a dirt path that eventually led him to the threshold of the unknown. Their journey came to a sudden halt at the edge of a gnarled forest, where he stood in disbelief as he realized he had finally reached the borderlands. After firing his first shot, a grim smile spread across his face as he accepted the challenge of navigating these corrupted lands. A surge of anticipation began to outweigh his unease, though he remained completely unaware of the small, dark figure watching him from the base of a nearby tree. As Clay and his companions reached the settlement, he took note of the rustic buildings and identified the area as Emeru village, situated right on the edge of the borderlands. Noting the fading light, Glenn advised Clay to wait until morning before heading to the borderlands. He then inquired about a month-long stay in the village, but Clay was skeptical that any such lodging existed. Noticing his predicament, Rita cheerfully invites him to stay at her place. Though Clay is hesitant about living with a girl his age, she quickly brushes off his concerns and insists he stay, Clay turns to Glanz for confirmation, questioning if he is genuinely comfortable with the arrangement, but Glanz reassures him that it is a well-deserved reward for saving them. Flustered and at a loss for words, Clay can only stand there as Rita watches the exchange with hopeful anticipation. Beneath the fading light of the twilight sky, he finally relented and accepted their offer, though he made it clear the arrangement would only last until he could establish a place of his own. The following morning, Clay woke up in a modest bed and rubbed the sleep from his eyes. After changing out of his traveling cloak, he headed downstairs, where Rita looked up from her work in the kitchen as she heard him approaching. After greeting him with a warm good morning, Rita presents a lavish breakfast as a further token of her thanks. Clay is impressed by the generous spread, and upon trying a potato, he finds the texture and flavor incredible, a quality Rita credits to them being freshly harvested. While eating, he confidently remarked that she must already be aware of his prowess after seeing him in action, briefly recalling the moment he unleashed a devastating spell. Glenn admitted the display was impressive, noting that he had never encountered such a potent form of magic before. When Glanz asks if he possesses any extraordinary skill seeds, he simply offers a faint smile and denies it. He revealed to the surprised duo that the only skill seeds in his possession were appraisal and mimicry. Lanz reacted with surprise as Reader recalled that skill seeds are divine manifestations of talent granted by the gods of birth and identified at a church, a fact Clay confirmed was accurate. He further explained that skill seeds act as a compass for one's potential, indicating whether someone is naturally suited for the sword or magic, though he noted that even the most promising talents require diligent training to truly flourish. Lance reflected on this, noting that while a combat-focused seed usually indicates a powerful warrior, Clay's abilities of appraisal and mimicry are actually quite ordinary. Accepting the situation with a faint smile, he admitted that while dual seeds are rare, they don't guarantee a future of greatness, downplaying his abilities as merely enhanced appraisal and a quicker knack for imitation. Her eyes widened as she processed the revelation, noting that his strength was even more impressive since he lacked a combat talent. This praise triggered a memory for Clay, taking him back to a moment with Sage Teridas, where he had lamented that his skill seeds would prevent him from ever being useful to anyone. Within that memory, Sage Teridas imparted a crucial lesson, explaining that a person's life isn't defined by their skill seed, but by the people they encounter along their journey. As he reflects on the memory, a gentle and thoughtful smile spreads across his face. While he reflects, Rita elaborates on her perspective, explaining that most people's lives aren't actually dictated by their skill seeds. To her, these seeds only represent raw potential, meaning the final outcome of one's life rests entirely in their own hands. The message was clear. Even with a common skill seed, one could still forge their own destiny through hard work and ingenuity. Once their conversation ended, Tarita turned to leave with a brief acknowledgement. Clay watched him depart before deciding it was finally time to head out and scout the borderlands. Just as he started to leave, an aggressive local blocked his path and shouted at him for being an outsider, leaving a nearby Clay looking completely confused. Ignoring Tiritas, the young man turned his hostility toward Clay, claiming he didn't care what tricks were used to deceive the others. He asserted that even if Glanz and the rest had accepted him, the village would never follow suit, finally shouting that there was no room for outsiders and demanding that Clay leave at once. He listened to the heated outburst, maintaining a calm and contemplative expression. As the villagers retreated with one last warning, Clay watched them go, silently noting the sheer depth of the man's hatred toward him. He understood their wariness, as settling so close to the borderlands was unheard of, making their reaction perfectly natural. Since he intended to stay and become their neighbor, he resolved to work patiently at bridging the gap between them. Driven by his newfound resolve, he turned away from the village and headed into the neighboring forest. As he ventured further into the woods, he recalled Glanz's mention of the herbs being a vital source of income for the village. The area felt peaceful and devoid of monsters, appearing to be nothing more than an ordinary forest, until everything changed. His reflections were cut short as he came to an abrupt, jarring standstill. Scanning the desolate landscape, he noticed the withered vegetation along the border and realized it was caused by an overwhelming density of ambient mana. The concentration was so extreme that he concluded anyone with low mana reserves would likely perish the moment they stepped into the area. Determined to measure its true power, he took a firm step forward, crossing the threshold into the mana-saturated territory. Upon entering, he was immediately met with an overwhelming pressure as the dense mana bore down on him from every side. As he ventured deeper, the atmosphere grew heavy, making it clear that this journey would be far from easy. His grim thoughts were suddenly interrupted by the sharp creak of a nearby tree. His gaze sharpened as he focused his senses, activating his appraisal skill to identify the hidden presence. Upon activating his appraisal skill, he identified a group of goblins, revealing their B+ combat rating, low intelligence, and high fertility rate. He had expected to encounter low-tier monsters in the borderlands, but these goblins were far more formidable than the common variety. Deciding they would serve as a perfect warm-up, he unsheathed his sword. The instant he unsheathed his blade, the entire goblin troop snapped their attention toward him, catching him off guard since he had been actively suppressing his presence. The creatures let out a collective piercing shriek as they lunged forward with unsettling speed, closing the gap in an instant. Their speed proved insufficient as he cut them all down in one decisive motion, concluding that even with enhanced strength, they were still nothing more than goblins. He stood alone among the defeated goblins, a solitary figure in the pale, eerie woods, where the air felt heavy with a strange energy. Examining the corpse, he noted that while it looked like a standard goblin, its agility was far superior, leading him to believe such traits were common among the monsters inhabiting the borderlands. His eyes widened as he observed the strange, pulsating flora, realizing that the region's dense mana was the key to the monster's enhanced power. To verify his suspicions, he extracts a magic stone from a fallen goblin and is immediately taken aback by its scale, as the gem is far larger than what a creature of that level should possess. As he held the stone, he realized that developing this land would be difficult without a way to control the mana, but his resolve only strengthened as he decided to press on with his exploration. Continuing his journey, he encountered a variety of bioengineered threats, ranging from predatory flora to peculiar sack-like beings and aggressive drakes, all of which he managed to defeat. Back in a nearby town, a young woman named Rita was suddenly jolted by the sharp sound of a door opening. She turned to greet Clay with a welcoming smile, though Rita was skeptical of his quick return and questioned if he had actually reached the borderlands, which Clay confirmed. Her surprise deepened upon realizing it was only just past noon, while Clay calmly noted that the location was every bit as fascinating as he had expected. Reassuring her of his sincerity, he presents the vast collection of magic stones he gathered during his short trip and offers them to her freely, leaving Rita speechless at his incredible generosity. He initially assumed she owned a storage vault, but Rita insisted they could never afford such a luxury. He soon realized that while common in urban centers, these items are a rarity in the remote frontier. Grateful for the gesture, she explains that the only magic tool in their possession capable of utilizing scrap stones is a basic lantern, leaving him to stare silently at his own weathered hand. He reflected on the harsh reality of their environment, noting that life on the frontier was a relentless struggle filled with hardships city dwellers would never encounter. A look of determination settles on his face as he acknowledges his debt to Rita, declaring that he's found a new mission. Taken aback by the sudden announcement, Rita questions why he would shoulder such a heavy burden for someone else's sake. Inside a simple room, a young man with messy dark hair steeled his resolve to begin his task. With a determined look, he activated a storage spell, causing a flood of wood, crystals, and crafting components to spill from a magical rift onto his workbench. Picking up a sharp, pin-like tool, he focuses intently on carving a design into the wood, the tip making a soft, crunching sound as it etches the surface. As his hands stay busy, his mind drifts back to why he chose to settle in the borderlands, a wild demonic territory at the kingdom's edge. He came here to cultivate the land and build a peaceful home for his friends to visit, fully aware that the region is saturated with a dense, magical energy that has birthed its own dangerous ecosystem. He acknowledged that although he wanted to start construction on a house immediately, his priority had to be research and experimentation to ensure the area was safe, leaving him dependent on Rita and the nearby villagers for now. Refocusing on the task at hand, He prioritizes completing the magic stove and resumes the delicate process of etching glowing runes onto its circular components. A faint, nostalgic smile touched his lips as he realized this was the first time he had been given a role of his own, entrusted with the responsibility of crafting magical devices. Emery transports him back to the moment he departed his village, driven by a sense of isolation that ultimately led him to join the hero's party. He summoned his companions, Prince Yuka, Sage Tiritas, and Aintes Flora, while reflecting on how he had always felt inferior due to his mediocre skill seeds. However, despite his own insecurities, none of them had ever looked down on him or treated him with coldness. As he sleeps, the memories grow more vivid, recalling the way they shielded him during monster attacks. Beyond just protecting him, they had even dedicated their time to teaching an illiterate boy how to read and write. The overwhelming weight of this kindness causes him to groan and stir restlessly in his bed. Stirred by a vivid dream, he sat up in a dimly lit, worn-down room as the bittersweet memories of his former companions weighed heavily on his mind. As he stirred from his sleep, a familiar voice called out to him. Yuka, the first prince, peeked through the tent flap with a gentle smile and asked if he was finally awake. Startled, he stammered a greeting, his smile widening as he cheerfully wished Clay a good morning. He deeply cherished these moments, as the simple routine of waking up and sharing breakfast provided a level of happiness he had never experienced during his years of isolation. He wasn't concerned with grand quests or defeating the Demon King. His only true ambition was to give back to the people who had changed his life, serving them in whatever way he could. That concludes our story for today. Thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button. I'll see you in the next one. Driven by a lingering need to be helpful, Clay met with the sage, Tiritas, who pointed toward an intricate diagram and asked if he was the one responsible for it. He studied the intricate magic circle spread across the parchment and silently confirmed that he had completed it. As he studied the drawing, his face filled with astonishment. He briefly questioned if something was wrong, only to clarify that the work was exceptionally well done, noting that even Magic Academy students would take a year to master such skill. This high praise left Clay feeling a profound sense of delight. He explained that through relentless imitation, he had eventually mastered drawing them with such precision, causing Tarita to fixate on the word copying as his mind began to race. The sage had a sudden realization, recalling that Clay possessed both the limitations skill seed and the appraisal ability. He acknowledged that both skills were typically considered mediocre, yet he began to suspect a potential synergy between them, while Clay overheard and looked puzzled as he repeated the unfamiliar terms. He explained that the data gathered through appraisal likely fueled the synergy of Kaido's skill seeds, making his imitation abilities far more precise. Wide-eyed at the potential, the sage raised a startling theory, that Kaido could flawlessly replicate any master's technique simply by observing it. As Kaido stammered in confusion, Tiritas grew certain that this was the very reason the prophecy had chosen him. Grabbing Kaido by the shoulders, he explained that if his theory was correct, the young man had the potential to eventually surpass even the legendary heroes. He stood there in complete shock, struggling to process the gravity of what he had just learned. Overwhelmed, he dropped to his knees before the sage and pleaded for guidance, vowing to do whatever was necessary. From then on, his life became a hectic yet rewarding blur as he strove to repay them by mimicking their unique talents. Tirita's magic, Yuka's swordsmanship, and Flora's divine arts. He reflected on how they had mentored him, passing down the powers they had spent years mastering. His only intention was to be of help by learning their techniques, never expecting that he would eventually be the one to defeat the Demon King. Returning to the present, Kaido examined his completed work with satisfaction before dinner, taking a moment to stretch and step outside for some fresh air. Finding Glanz outside, he voiced his growing concern about a monster from the borderlands reaching the village, and Glanz confirmed the danger, noting that even a single one would be a significant threat. He explained that the monsters never venture that far for one simple, absolute reason. Leaving the borderlands results in their immediate death, a revelation that left Kaido completely stunned. While absorbing this startling revelation, Glanz confirmed that monsters inevitably perish if they leave the borderlands, surviving for only a week or at the very most a month on their own. Stunned by this discovery, he struggled to comprehend why they were unable to survive beyond their borders, questioning what could possibly set their land apart from the rest of the world, until the answer finally clicked. It was the mana. A while later, he and Gland arrived back at the house, where Rita met them at the entrance with a warm and cheerful welcome. She noted their timing was perfect as she was about to start dinner, prompting Kaido to reveal he had finished a new magic tool he wanted them to test. An announcement that caught Glands completely off guard. Her bright smile quickly faded, giving way to a look of utter confusion. He then showcased his handiwork, unveiling a polished two-burner magic stove and a tall storage unit. Both the father and daughter stared in utter disbelief. Rita stammered that it was truly a magical device, and a sweating Glands could only agree. Feeling overwhelmed, Rita tried to decline the valuable gift, but Kaito quickly brushed her concerns aside. He explained that since he would be relying on them for a while, she should consider the device a form of payment, and he immediately set to work installing it. Her expression softened as she watched him, while Kaito explained that the magic stove held a special significance, as it was the very first tool his master had ever taught him to craft. Memories of his training with Tiritas came flooding back, recalling his master's advice that mastering this craft would allow him to earn a living by bringing joy to others. To Tiritas, the ultimate purpose of any magic tool was to enrich the lives of the people who used them. He expressed his hope that the items would be useful, prompting a nervous reaction from Glands, while a visibly moved Rita clasped her hands and softly spoke Kaido Zalius's name. Shock quickly turned to excitement as Rita accepted the gift, thrilled that she could now prepare even better meals for Kaido. Not wanting to be left out, an eager glance immediately asked her for a lesson on how to use it. As Rita begins to cook, she is impressed by the magic stone's efficiency. It ignites instantly and allows for effortless flame control, while Kaido watches her with a satisfied smile. As the meal is prepared, Glands turns his attention to the storage unit, questioning if it truly keeps food fresh just by being placed inside. Kaido confirms its effectiveness even for meat and fish, leading Glands to admit he's never seen one in person while the batter sizzles on the new stove. After he identifies the pancakes, Rita confirms his guess, explaining that she always struggled to cook thick ones evenly and hoped this new magic stove would finally solve her temperature control issues. The result was a perfectly cooked, fluffy pancake, leaving Glands to cry out in pure astonishment at the sight. He turned to Rita and praised her for mastering the new tools so quickly, and as she laughed bashfully at the compliment, Kaido watched him continue. Although the stove's performance was remarkable, Glands quickly grew concerned about its upkeep, fearing that such a high-end tool would require a massive, expensive magic stone they couldn't afford to replace. Kaito quickly brushes off the concerns, but Glands persists, noting that magic tools are typically luxury items that require large, standardized magic stones. Kaido acknowledges that this is usually the case, only to reveal a significant modification. He has redesigned the stove to run on common junk stones. He adds that the device is currently powered by a simple magic stone from a borderlands goblin, a revelation that leaves Glands completely stunned. He explains that this is a unique custom model exclusive to him and his master, a level of craftsmanship that even royalty cannot obtain. As the significance of this news sinks in, Glands and Rita are visibly shaken, with Glands noting that the item is far more than a simple luxury. It is a revolutionary invention of immeasurable value. Kaido and Rita stood before a two-story house with their backs to the viewer, letting out a cry of pure disbelief at the sight. Nearby, a group of villagers gossiped about the commotion, with one man remarking on how lively Glands' home had become while a woman noted rumors that their young guest, Kaido, was actually their benefactor. A man with a scar over his eye admits that while he initially found Kaido suspicious, the wholesome behavior of his family has changed his mind. But a nearby youth in a dark headband overhears this and bristles with anger, certain it's all a facade, and vowing to expose Kaido's true nature. Claire's navigated a path that cut deep through the dense woods. A young villager suddenly emerged from behind a tree to confront Claire's, demanding to know how he knew his name. Claire's calmly identified the boy as Kiza, explaining that Glands had mentioned his father served in the village guard. Kiza explains they are in the borderlands and advises him to turn back. though he maintains that monitoring strangers is part of his duty to protect the village. Still skeptical, the guard remained convinced that Glanz was being far too naive and that Clayhurst was definitely hiding his true intentions. As Clayers turns to depart, Kiza calls out for him to wait, acknowledging their mutual distrust while urging him to remain vigilant within the village, as if he already knows what the traveler is truly seeking. Kiza lashes out at Clayers, accusing him of targeting Rita and swearing to protect her from the stranger. Unfazed by the outburst, Clayers simply muses to himself about the passion of youth while Kiza continues to shout. Ignoring the accusations, he continued his journey, leaving Kiza to watch him vanish into the forest as she wondered if he was truly bound for the borderlands. The young villager's unease was rooted in his father's stern warning to never enter that forest alone and to turn back immediately. Despite his apprehension, the praise from Rita and another village boy suggested a different reality. He remembered them idolizing Clayers, with Rita fondly describing how he wiped out a monster horde in an instant, while the other boy regarded him as their true savior. A flashback reveals the players wielding orbs of crackling energy, unleashing wind magic that sliced through massive tree trunks as if they were mere twigs. He set to work with practiced efficiency, using water magic to draw moisture from the felled trees and earth magic to level the uneven ground before finally employing telekinesis to assemble the logs in mid-air with precision. With the final piece secured, the construction was finished, and he stepped back to admire the simple yet sturdy wooden shelter he had built. Resting atop his latest creation, he felt a sense of pride, noting that the sunlight now pouring through the cleared trees had transformed the once gloomy borderlands into something far more welcoming. He found the situation increasingly suspicious. If developing this land only required clearing trees and leveling the ground, someone surely would have done it by now. It was strange that despite the kingdom's centuries of effort, there was still no sign of any human settlement. Suspecting the dense mana and the powerful monsters it attracted were to blame, he decided a trial run was essential. He planned to leave the structure overnight to see how it fared by morning, wondering if the kingdom had simply given up on the territory, or if there was a deeper reason for its abandonment. Upon returning to the village, he noticed a concerned crowd gathered together. Through their hushed conversations, he learned that the fields were empty and someone had gone missing. The locals were retracing the person's steps and even feared they might have fallen into a nearby pond. While watching, he noticed a muscular man with a scarred eye turn toward him in recognition. It was Alzam, Kiza's father, who seemed visibly startled by the encounter. Alzam's expression shifted to one of deep concern as he explained that Kiza hadn't come home. He reminded them of the village's standing rule. No one is to venture outside after sunset, as the forest becomes infested with lethal creatures from the borderlands. Though Kiza was known for his strict obedience to this law, tonight he was nowhere to be found. Listening with visible concern, Clay held on to the faint hope that Kiza had simply fallen asleep somewhere in a nearby village. A grim possibility soon occurred to him. Kiza might have followed him into the forest. Taking initiative, he told Alzam he would finish his search of the village before heading into the woods, requesting an update if she was found in the meantime. Determined to locate the missing boy, he pressed 2 fingers to his temple to investigate further. He responded by casting a detection spell, sending concentric rings of light rippling outward to scan the vicinity. The spell soon revealed its findings. Kiza was nowhere to be found within the village. His suspicions were confirmed. The boy was in the forest. Knowing what had to be done, he prepared to go after him. He bolted into the dark woods, frustrated that his detection magic was limited to a 2-kilometer radius compared to Tarides' 5-kilometer reach. To make up for the shorter range, he kept the spell active while running until his magic suddenly flared. He located him 2 kilometers ahead, and for the time being, Kiza appeared to be safe. His relief vanished instantly when the spell detected a massive creature closing in on Kiza. He accelerated his pace, calling out Kiza's name into the darkness and urging him to stay strong. Unbeknownst to him, Kiza was already cowering behind a nearby rock, paralyzed with fear. Standing on a nearby ridge, a massive bear-like creature with a single horn on its snout towered over the landscape, its sheer scale making the surrounding trees look small by comparison. The creature was a red grizzly, a monster native to the borderlands, and Kiza couldn't fathom how it had wandered so far from its territory. Panic surged through him as he realized his father or the other villagers might encounter the beast while searching for him. He knew he had to escape immediately to warn everyone to stay clear of the forest. As he braced himself to flee, the massive red grizzly simply lay down in the clearing, and, much to Kiza's astonishment, appeared to fall fast asleep. Recognizing this as his only shot, Kiza moved with extreme care as he began to distance himself from the sleeping beast. After creating some distance, he glanced back with a mix of relief and lingering fear, while the beast remained motionless, its heavy breathing echoing through the trees. As he attempted to flee, he lost his footing and crashed to the ground, panic visible on his face as he realized his error. As he sat frozen on the forest floor, Clay called out to him, but it was already too late. The red grizzly had awakened, its massive horned shadow looming over them both. Without missing a beat, the beast lashes out with a massive claw that sends Kiza crashing through the forest, leaving a horrified Clay to curse his inability to reach them in time. Before he could reach the fallen boy, two massive spectral wolves manifested from the shadows and lunged toward him. Once the beasts are dealt with, he hurries to Kiza's side. The boy is bleeding heavily from a deep gash across his torso, but Clay reassures him that he is finally safe. Keys only manages a weak laugh, questioning why a stranger would bother coming for him. He is certain that an injury this severe is impossible to survive. As he lay on the forest floor beneath the moonlight, Kaiser reflected on his actions, realizing he wasn't a victim, but a fool who had brought this fate upon himself by breaking the rules. His mind drifts back to a memory of Clay and Rita, recalling his bewilderment that someone skilled enough to thrive in the royal capital would ever settle in their remote village. She recalled the sharp envy in his eyes. Despite Clay already possessing everything he could want, he still felt as though Clay was stealing Rita away from him. As the memory recedes, Clay places his hand over the severe wound and invokes a powerful X-heal spell, calling upon divine light to mend the boy's injury. As the glow fades, Kiza sits up and gazes at his chest to find the lethal wound has vanished, leaving only his shredded, blood-soaked tunic behind. He stares in stunned silence, unable to wrap his mind around what just occurred. Sweat beads on his brow as he stares at his fully restored body, stunned by the incredible recovery after being certain he was going to die. Clay calmly asks if the pain has subsided, noting how fortunate it is that he survived, but a frustrated Kiza retorts that his survival isn't the issue at hand. Sitting up, he looked at Clay with a mix of confusion and shame, questioning why he would go to such lengths for someone who didn't even like him. Clay merely smiled, dismissing their past animosity as nothing more than a bit of harmless jealousy. He continued by emphasizing his seniority and urged Kiza to stand, reminding him that everyone was worried and they could talk later. As the group drew closer to the village, two residents spotted them and reacted with visible alarm. Clay arrived at the village with an exhausted Kiza on his back, drawing a crowd of relieved villagers who rushed to meet them. Upon spotting his father among the group, Kiza immediately called out to him. Instead of a warm homecoming, Keys is met with a strike to the head from his father, who berates him for his reckless behavior. The man demands to know why Keys defied his direct orders to stay out of the forest, leaving Clay stunned by the sudden display of anger. Once his fury subsided, the man turned to Clay with sincere gratitude, acknowledging that his son only survived because of his intervention, while Clay humbly replied that he was simply glad he could be of assistance. He quickly interjected, proudly announcing to his father and the gathered villagers that Clay had defeated a stray red grizzly. This revelation sent a shockwave through the crowd, leaving his father in disbelief as he questioned how such a feat was possible when even veteran adventuring parties from the borderlands struggled against those beasts. Clay presented a massive dark magic stone as evidence, prompting Kiza to ask if it had been harvested from the grizzly. Upon Clay's confirmation, the villagers gasped in shock, with one remarking that they had never seen a magic stone of such immense proportions. Clay listened as Keys's father explained the severity of the situation. Whenever a stray monster from the borderlands appeared, the entire forest was placed under lockdown, halting all hunting and gathering until the beast was eliminated. The man emphasized that by taking down the creature, Clay had provided an immense service to the entire community. His serious expression gave way to a booming laugh as he pulled Clay into a one-armed embrace, announcing a village feast for that night to celebrate the safe return of both Clay and Kiza, while proudly declaring that Clay had handled everything himself. While the village celebrated, a starkly different scene unfolded far away in the cold stone corridors beneath the royal castle, where a new plan was already being set in motion. Alone, Cloak began to descend a flight of stone stairs, his quiet footsteps echoing through the silence. Moving deeper into the dark, arched corridor, the figure murmured quietly, confirming that this was indeed the hiding spot they had previously seen. Reaching the end of the hall, they halted before a massive figure bound in chains, the corpse of the Demon King. The visitor noted the creature's overwhelming presence, sensing a power that refused to fade even in death. Reaching out to the fallen king, the figure swore a solemn oath to see his final wishes realized. With their true goal of punishing the accursed hero now clear, the royal faction began to mobilize under the cover of darkness. The village hall hums with life as the locals gather for a celebratory feast, their laughter punctuated by the constant clinking of mugs. Amidst the festivities, the village chief finally makes his first appearance. Following the festivities, Kiza and the village chief approach Clay, where Kiza's father offers a deep bow to thank him for saving his son. Clay, however, humbly insists that he is the one who should be grateful for being allowed to stay. He greeted the chief with a friendly smile and offered his assistance, while Kiza stood quietly nearby, a lingering cut from the recent battle still marking his cheek. The villager catches Clay off guard with a deep bow, offering sincere thanks and confessing that he only survived because of Clay's help. Clay silently notes the man's sudden and drastic change in attitude. He went on to explain that while he had always dreamed of being an adventurer, his lack of strength and influence kept him tethered to the village. Seeing an outsider like Clay arrive only served to fuel his deep-seated jealousy. Visibly overcome with shame, Kiza admits to his previous mistreatment, fumbling for words as Clay listens intently. His embarrassment transforms into a desperate plea as Kiza clenches his fists, shouting for Clay to teach him how to fight while calling him Big Bro. Stunned by the sudden request and the title used, Clay's eyes widen in disbelief while Yuka watches the scene unfold with a calm, knowing smile. As his initial shock subsided, a sly and thoughtful smile crept across his face, signaling that he had reached a decision and was ready to make his move. Later, as the villagers shared a meal under the evening sky, Clay was asked if he had taken Kiza as a disciple. Sitting with the boy and Rita, he clarified that he would only train him during his spare time. He accepted the request to train Kiza, explaining to a worried Rita that the boy's growth would be limited if he stayed confined to the village forever. Although she questioned if he had enough time, he assured her he would teach the boy as much as possible within reason. A smile crossed his face as he remembered that his own progress was fueled by his friend's belief in his potential, making him more than willing to help Kiza grow by sharing his expertise. He explains to the young man that their training won't be a daily routine, but will instead fit between his tasks developing the borderlands. After suggesting that Kiza's father remain his primary instructor, the boy eagerly agrees while clenching his fists in excitement. As the three sat together later that day, Kiza voiced a sudden curiosity about Clay's goal for the borderlands, prompting Clay to explain that he wanted to develop the land into a home where he could eventually welcome his comrades. His unexpected response leaves them stunned. While Kiza assumes his companions must be incredibly powerful, Clay clarifies that he simply views the borderlands as the ideal place for everyone to truly unwind. Gazing into the distance with a sincere expression, he felt that this was the only way he could truly repay them for everything they had done. Moved by his conviction, Kiza expresses a genuine interest in meeting Clay's comrades, prompting Rita to laugh and warn him that he's in for a surprise, as Clay's friends are likely far from ordinary. By the following day, they had ventured deep into the borderlands, where the forest grew dense with ancient trees. Clay navigated the thick undergrowth, returning to inspect the area he had cleared a day earlier. He stopped short in bewilderment. Where a clearing should have been, a dense wall of massive trees now stood, making him question his path despite being certain he was in the right spot. He stared in disbelief at the massive trees that had regrown overnight, completely engulfing the pavilion he'd built. It finally made sense why everyone else had abandoned this land. as such impossible growth suggested a hidden, unnatural cause. Kneeling to the earth, he touched the soil and confirmed his theory. The mana wasn't just in the air, but the ground itself was saturated with energy, fueling the rampant vegetation. Faced with such an overwhelming phenomenon, he wondered how he could even begin to address it. While Clay ponders the problem, someone approaches from behind to ask what he's doing. Still lost in thought, he murmurs about the mana in the soil, a concept that triggers a memory from his past travels. Cerritos explains that the fields near his home are infertile, so he's been channeling his own mana into the soil to provide nutrients, a detail that sparks a sudden realization for Clay. He theorized that if mana could nourish the soil, then removing it should have the opposite effect, potentially halting the rampant growth by draining the land's excess energy. Driven by a newfound sense of resolve, he decides to take the risk, manifesting an intricate magical sigil between his palms to begin drawing mana directly from the earth. 3 days later, he continues to grapple with the situation, concluding that he must reverse Cerritos' technique while finding a way to deplete the enormous amount of mana he's absorbing. His focus was suddenly interrupted by a familiar voice as Alzam, Kisa's father, approached with a wave. He explained that Kisa had informed him of the development project, and he wanted to lend a hand as a way of showing his gratitude. Clay was truly grateful for the assistance, as Alisman explained that he was the only person in the village capable of braving the borderlands before gesturing for him to follow. As they travel together, Alzam hesitates to question the man who saved his son, even though he knows the borderlands are too treacherous for anyone to face alone. Yet, seeing Clay's poise, he doubts the young man would even listen to his concerns. He chooses to wait nearby, expecting the young man to eventually give up, while Clay feels a twinge of guilt knowing Alzam traveled so far for such a hopeless cause. He gestures toward a clearing to reveal a newly built house, standing where the dense forest once was, as Clay announces that the construction is already finished. Alzam stared in complete shock, but Clay remained unfazed, warmly welcoming him as his first guest and offering to brew some tea. His shock quickly turns into a frantic protest as he points out the futility of building there, explaining that the borderland trees regrow the moment they are cut down. Clay calmly agrees, recalling how a pavilion he once built met that very same fate. Flashing a confident smile, he explained that the issue had already been addressed, before asking Alzam if he would like to see a demonstration. He planted his foot firmly, anchoring himself with a steady step. As the strange roots receded into the earth, he explained how he had cleared the area by felling the trees and leveling the ground, leaving Alzam speechless with confusion. A massive, intricate magic circle suddenly surged from the earth, flooding the clearing with light. Clay then detailed how he had layered 2 separate spells together, leaving Alism speechless at the display. Focusing on the lower circle, he explained that it was designed to siphon mana directly from the earth, noting it was the most demanding spell in his entire repertoire. The mechanism operates as a 2-stage process. A lower spell siphons excess mana from the earth, while an upper spell continuously incinerates it, ensuring that once the soil is depleted, the unnaturally fast-growing trees will no longer be able to regenerate. After explaining the logic behind the ritual, the only thing left to do was activate it. As he extended his hand over the shimmering runes, a gentle light began to radiate from the ground. The faint glow suddenly surged into a massive pillar of energy, creating a violent vortex of mana that shook the air as the spell activated with immense force. Alzam watched with sweat beading on his brow, his teeth gritted in disbelief at the sheer scale of the magic, while Clay calmly explained that they only needed to wait for the mana to be fully consumed. After the land was left barren and cleared, Clay explained that he had monitored the area for several days to ensure no new growth appeared before finally building his house on the empty plot. Surveying the cleared land and his new home, Clay wore a satisfied smile. Alzheimer remarked on how impressive it was that he had brute-forced his way through such a massive obstacle. Pleased with the result, Clay invited him for a housewarming with drinks later, noting his pride in the interior they hadn't seen yet. Meanwhile, a small, dark figure watched them from the shadows of the deep woods. Alsam's smile vanished as he sensed something was off, his gaze immediately shifting toward the dark tree line. Clay noticed the sudden tension and turned to look as well. Noticing the worry etched on Al's face, He offered a steady smile and calmly addressed him by name. He then disclosed that he'd known they were being watched for a week, explaining that he only ignored the presence because it hadn't acted, while Alzum remained silent, taking in the revelation. To ease his friend's nerves, Clay placed a steadying hand on Alzum's shoulder. Though Alzum remained skeptical about their safety, Clay reassured him, noting that he had an additional reason to be confident in his decision. As he explained, the forest's true identity was revealed. It wasn't made of trees, but the petrified remains of a massive creature whose skeletal frame formed a natural wall around the clearing. He stood before Alzum, his shadowed silhouette radiating a heavy pressure that caused the man to break into a cold sweat, his face contorted with fear. His expression shifts to a look of unsettling confidence as he asserts that he will personally handle any threat that arises, leaving Alzum to offer a strained laugh while noting that Clay is actually terrified. With the conversation over, the hidden watcher clicks their tongue in irritation and quickly slips back through the thick undergrowth. As the silhouetted figure leaped through the trees, his mind raced with a single question regarding the human's true identity. The figure reached a somber conclusion, deciding that if he posed a threat to their territory, they would be forced to fight him. Elsewhere, Teredes raises concerns regarding security, pointing out that the rare magical tools kept beneath the castle make the threat of an infiltration a serious risk. Joining the conversation with a sharp focus, Laura immediately deduced that his concerns were centered around the Demon King's corpse. She questioned the body's worth, assuming it was a magicless husk, but Terita clarified that it was preserved by a time-freezing spell and might still hold something valuable for a thief. A sinister smile crosses his face as he declares he'd rather incinerate the remains himself than let anyone else exploit them. He explains that reporting the incident would only cause Conrad to doubt Yuka's achievements, suggesting a cover-up that leaves Flora visibly annoyed as she listens. Flora's frustration eventually shifts into a deep sense of exhaustion. She laments that despite defeating the Demon King, they are now spiraling toward a conflict between their own kind. Feeling like a mere political tool, she resents the church for pressuring her into a strategic marriage with Yuka. Teredes offers a bleak perspective in response, noting that world peace only ever signified the end of the demonic threat. He concludes that humanity is trapped in an endless cycle of war, one they can never truly hope to escape. Despite the weight of the political discussion, Flora's mind drifted as she realized how much she longed for him. She softly whispered his name, Clay, while the man himself stood silently near the doorway with an unreadable expression. Claire watched from the clearing as Kiza settled into a combat stance, sword in hand, ready to begin another round of training. The young villager lunged ahead, his strike suddenly faster and more accurate, causing the air to crackle from the sheer force of his blade. He offers a smile, noting that Kiza is finally making progress, while a sweat-drenched Kiza agrees, though he feels frustrated by how long it took him to master the technique. The cleaner's tone turns urgent as he catches hold of Clay, questioning if he truly intends to leave Glanz's home for the borderlands. He desperately urges Clay to remain in the village, though the young man appears reluctant to commit. Clay explains that his house is finally complete, meaning he can no longer overstay his welcome with the family. He urges Kiza to remain dedicated to his training even in his absence. Though Kiza insists on learning from him directly, Clay reassures the boy by promising to return periodically to check on his progress. After bidding his farewells, Clay approached his newly finished home in the borderlands, a solid 2-story structure standing alone amidst the vast wilderness. Once inside, he set to work arranging the furniture, sliding a wooden chair up to a long table marked by a deep scratch. Stepping back with his hands on his hips, he surveyed the space, noting that the addition of the furniture and bookshelf finally made it feel like a proper home. Jay's gaze settles on the sleeping bag atop a basic frame, leading him to realize he can no longer sleep like this. He decides his next task will be crafting a proper bed, feeling proud of the furniture he's already built using local techniques. A smile crossed his face as he imagined the future, envisioning a self-sufficient life where he could expand his home for guests and eventually build a relaxing outdoor bath. Gazing out from his new home, he felt a profound sense of gratitude toward the ancient laws that had granted him this opportunity. The sheer scale of the land was staggering, as he now possessed the rare freedom to develop the entire forest, an incredible opportunity that few would ever be granted. Despite his desire to continue training Kiza personally, he realized that the daily trek through the forest between the borderlands and Emeru village was far too taxing to maintain. He continued to dwell on the issue, realizing that a secure path through the forest would not only simplify his travels, but also allow others to reach his home on their own. A bold idea took shape in his mind. He would take charge and construct a proper road himself. Driven by his new sense of purpose, he donned his cloak and set out, planning to consult a merchant about bedding and seeds while handling all his other inquiries in a single trip. Clay eventually tracked down Glanz and, while sharing a meal with him and Rita, detailed his ambitious plan to build a road through the forest. The merchant listened with an amused expression, noting that Clay's ideas were always the most unconventional. He detailed his plan to clear a section of the forest for a paved road leading straight to the borderlands, though he admitted the area's significance to the people of Emerald could be a major hurdle. He explained that the villagers depended on the area for hunting and gathering, which is why he preferred to discuss the matter rather than acting alone. Glance found the idea sound, noting that he had no objections as long as the village chief granted his permission. Lanz encouraged him to approach the chief the following day, smiling as he noted that Rita had been feeling lonely and would surely appreciate more frequent visits. Sitting right beside him, Rita let out a flustered cry in response to her father's teasing. Clay turns to Rita to confirm what he's heard, leaving her visibly flustered as she struggles to find the right words. She softly confirms the truth, blushing as she admits that her life has become far more vibrant and enjoyable since his arrival, leaving Clay completely stunned by her sudden vulnerability. Her eyes shimmered with hope as she clasped her hands, asking if she could visit him once the road was finally complete. He offers a warm smile and agrees instantly, reassuring her by explaining his plan to install magical tools along the path to ward off monsters. As he guarantees her safety, his face beams with joy. He paused for a moment, his expression turning thoughtful as he considered adding one more safeguard. He advised that despite the safety measures, she should bring a capable fighter along, offering a friendly smile as he suggested Kiza for the task. Considering the suggestion, she notes that Kiza's recent dedication to his training might finally make him someone they can count on. Hearing this, Clay clenches his fist in silent support. As the next day dawned, the morning sun began to illuminate the village. Inside the office, Clay stood before the village chief in his cloak as the elder thoughtfully repeated the proposal to construct a road through the forest. He questioned if the idea was flawed, but the chief dismissed his concerns, explaining that he was simply caught off guard. Assuring him that the plan was sound, the chief revealed that the forest already contained the remnants of an ancient road. Following the village chief's revelation, Clay's next objective became clear. To move forward, he had to find that specific location, and reasoning that the local hunters and wardens would know the area best, he decided to ask Alzum to guide him there. Turning back to the elder, he expressed his sincere gratitude for the quick approval of the project and the vital information shared. However, the chief waved off the thanks, insisting it was the least he could do after Clay's help with Kiza. He explained that Emeru village was originally founded by a scouting party, tasked with developing the borderlands. As a descendant of those pioneers, the chief pledged to help Clay fulfill the dream they had once been forced to give up. Deeply moved by the weight of his history, the elders offered their full support, leaving Clay momentarily speechless before he managed a quiet, heartfelt thank you. With Alzum's assistance secured, Clay followed him deep into the woods, where they were soon surrounded by a dense thicket of tall, pale trees. Eventually, Alzum came to a halt and gestured toward the forest floor, instructing Clay to look closely at the broken stone tiles peeking through the undergrowth as the final remnants of the old road. Kneeling to examine the path, Clay questioned its age. Alzum couldn't be certain, but he estimated it was at least a century old, noting that it had looked exactly the same since he first began traveling through the forest. He explained that although the path was clearer than the surrounding woods, their work consisted of two main tasks: felling trees and laying down stone tiles. Clay agreed, noting that the process was similar to building his own house, though much simpler now that they were away from the borderlands. With the plan finalized, Alzum signaled for them to begin. The two wasted no time getting to work. While Alzine began clearing the trees, Clay utilized his wind magic to slice through the timber and uproot the old, broken stones from the earth. After clearing the path, He slammed his palms into the earth to cast ground press, crushing the soil into a perfectly level foundation that left Alzam stunned by his display of power. Surveying the newly cleared ground, he decided to wait until the entire route was finished before laying any stone tiles, though Alzam was already impressed by how much it looked like a proper road. Flashing a determined smile, he shared his plan to clear the old road leading to the borderlands, but Alzam quickly cut him off with a dismissive hand gesture. Doubtful of the timeline, the older man asked if he truly intended to finish the entire project that day, but Clay simply gave a cheerful confirmation and urged Alzam to lead the way. Moments later, Alzam stood in stunned silence as a perfectly paved stone road shimmered before him, finally bridging the distance between the forest and the village. Stunned that Clay had actually managed to complete the task, Alzam dismissed his apologies for the late hour, insisting that witnessing such an incredible feat was well worth the wait. Alzam remarked that the new road would finally allow his son, Kiza, to visit independently, while Clay noted that it would also make his training much easier to manage. His expression grew serious as he turned to Clay with a pressing question. He noted that Kiza's solo training was yielding impressive results, with his movements becoming sharper and his progress outstripping all expectations. In fact, Alzam had been right on the cusp of advancing him to the next phase of his instruction. He then asked Clay directly if he had ever examined the keys for Skill C. Aliceman repeated the unfamiliar term, leading Clay to explain that if Kiza truly intended to become an adventurer, he needed to identify his talents or risk wasting his potential. In response, Aliceman admitted that he didn't believe anyone in their village had ever undergone such an assessment. The young man realized he remained unaware of his skill seed until joining his companions, prompting Alzam to explain the hardships faced by those in the remote borderlands. Since these seeds could only be identified using magical tools at a church, and the nearest one was located in the distant royal capital, the journey was both grueling and far too expensive for most to undertake. He then suggested an alternative, asking Alzam for permission to inspect Kiza's skill seed. While Alzam agreed, he remained visibly puzzled as to how such a feat was even possible. Alzam immediately asked if Clay planned to bring Kiza to the capital, a suggestion Clay was quick to dismiss. With a confident smile, he revealed his true intentions. He would personally craft a magic tool capable of identifying skill seeds. This bold claim left Alzam completely stunned and at a loss for words. He explained that while the church technically holds exclusive rights to skill seed checkers, their production is a guarded state secret that his master had uncovered and passed down to him. Looking completely drained, Alzam admitted he was done being surprised by such outrageous claims, questioning if there was anything Clay couldn't do before correctly predicting the magic tool would be finished by the next day. Clay then extended the offer to Alzam, asking if he wanted his own skill seed examined, and even suggested checking anyone else in the village who was interested, a proposal Alzam readily accepted. As Alzam turned to depart, intending to gather information before curfew, Clay called out for him to wait. With a wave of his hand, he summoned countless magical sparks that instantly illuminated the dark forest path and cast a soft glow over the trees. They explained that despite the newly constructed road, the dark forest remained a treacherous path, but the lights would guarantee Al's group a safe journey home. While Alzam was appreciative, he jokingly teased that the gesture felt a bit too romantic for a simple walk, prompting Clay to smile and offer to escort him the rest of the way home. Walking alongside him, Alzam finally gave voice to the concerns that had been weighing on his mind, recounting Clay's recent feats, from clearing an entire road in a single day to his effortless use of high-tier magic and his latest offer to build a skill seed checker. Alzam pressed for an answer, keeping his eyes locked on Clay as he demanded to know his true identity. With a disarming smile, he claimed to be nothing more than a commoner seeking to develop the borderlands. But his memories told a different story, one where he stood alone against both a beast general and the demon king. By the following morning, a palpable sense of excitement had settled over the entire village. Standing alongside a satisfied Alzam and a curious Rita, Clay surveyed the growing crowd with a look of surprise, admitting he had only expected them to bring those who were genuinely interested. Clay's surprise quickly turned to shock as he took in the full scale of the gathering, realizing the entire village had turned out to see him. After a voice from the crowd pointed out the obvious curiosity of the masses, Clay was left speechless, completely overwhelmed by the sheer number of people present. As a boisterous crowd gathered in the town square, a scarred man named Alzum remarked to his companion that offering free skill checks was a mistake, as the entire village seemed to have appeared. His partner agreed, though he remained curious about the potential skill seeds they might uncover, while Clay watched from a distance, stunned by the massive turnout. Alzum cast a skeptical look at the smooth slate in Clay's hands, questioning if it was truly the skill checker he had created, as it appeared to be nothing more than an ordinary metal plate. Clay eagerly points out the device's mithril foundation and specialized circuitry, but Alzum quickly shuts him down, uninterested in a technical breakdown he wouldn't be able to follow. As they stand there, the village chief emerges from a nearby building and asks Clay if he can be the first to test the device. As the chief approached, Clay set the slate onto a wooden counter and instructed the elder to rest his hand upon its surface. Clay rests his palm against the slate, explaining that it takes roughly 30 seconds for the skill seed to manifest as Alzum looks on with curiosity. As they waited, Clay explained that his device differs from the church's version by keeping results private to the user, a feature he intentionally included in the design. He followed this with a stern warning, advising the chief to keep his skill seed hidden to avoid being exploited or forcibly recruited by villains or even the church. His face grows grim as he listens, recalling past accounts of the church forcibly seizing children who possessed the saint's skill seed. A sudden radiance emanates from Slate, startling the village chief as glowing runes and script manifest on its surface to reveal his skill. Clay, watching the display, assures the chief that he will take responsibility for alerting the rest of the villagers. Placing his hand over the device, the village chief watched as the glowing runes solidified into the title of ruler, a result that left him in silent contemplation. He inquired about the ruler skill, an ability he had never encountered before. Clay, visibly impressed, explained that it was an exceptionally rare and powerful skill, perfectly suited for a village cheat. He clarified that this was also known as the commander skill, a rare talent that would lead to immediate recruitment by the church or military if discovered. Clay was quick to reassure the chief, however, that he wouldn't have to worry about being scouted for their forces just yet. The chief's gaze drifted as he lamented gaining such a powerful skill so late in life, catching Clay off guard and prompting him to ask if the chief wished he'd discovered it during his youth. Shaking his head with a faint, knowing smile, he admitted that if he had known the truth back then, he would have lived a much more reckless life. With a newfound clarity, the village chief could finally face the future with a clear sense of purpose. While Clay listened as the weight of the situation began to sink in, sensing he had overstepped by prying into the old man's past, Clay offered a sincere apology, but the chief simply brushed it off. With the matter resolved, the village chief turned to the gathered youth, dismissing his earlier stories as mere ramblings, while offering his sincere thanks to Clay for giving the younger generation a chance to realize their potential. As he observed the villagers, he realized that the chief's steady leadership was likely the reason this remote settlement had thrived. Accompanied by Alzum, he addressed the gathering crowd, announcing that it was time for everyone to line up for their skill evaluations. Following his directions, a line quickly assembled in the village square, where a low hum of excitement filled the air as everyone awaited their turn. As the skill assessments commence, the villagers pass the time by teasing Kiza about his potential abilities. One suggests he might be a cook, but Rita points out his talent for reading and teaching instead. Glanz agrees that teacher is a fitting, if underwhelming, role for him, prompting an annoyed Keza to shout at them to be quiet. As Glanz finishes his assessment, Clay reads the result displayed by the glowing seed, negotiator. He comments that the skill suits Glanz perfectly, given his persuasive nature, noting that the military would highly value such an ability for recruitment. When Alzum presented his skill seed, it manifested as Guardian Warrior, leaving him to gaze at the glowing text with an unreadable expression. Turning to Clay, he inquired about the skill's specifics, prompting a nervous Clay to admit that in his rush to check the skill seeds, he had forgotten to provide any warnings or explanations. Alzum clarifies that Guardian Warrior is a high-quality skill seed, though his history as an adventurer led him to expect a combat-focused ability. He acknowledges that this is a strong alternative. He explains that it pairs effectively with defensive skills like fighting spirit, and even sorcery, though he shoots Clay a skeptical grimace at the thought of himself actually wielding magic. He broke into a grin, noting that the title of Guardian Warrior was perfectly suited for a protector, while Clay watched with a small smile, appreciating the man's genuine reaction. After noticing everyone's satisfaction with their results, Clay watches as Alzum's expression turns serious once more. Alzum explains that Clay's actual skill seed is a specialized ultimate move that has already been evaluated, leaving the young man visibly puzzled by the cryptic explanation. As Clay looked toward the villagers, the chief voiced his hope that Yuko would summon him again soon, assuring him he would always be welcome. A gesture of kindness that brought a sincere smile to Clay's face. This sudden warmth brings back a chilling memory of his own ceremony in a sterile hall, where he was granted nothing but useless skills like mimicry and hole digging, leaving him with the crushing feeling that his world was falling apart. Alzum's voice pulls him back to reality, as the elder explains that a skill seed merely identifies one's aptitude and nothing more. He mentions the children who suffer under the weight of parental pressure, only to face a crushing reality during the ceremony. Listening intently, Clay concludes that it might be best to simply take things as they come. He watched as Alzum waved energetically from the crowd, laughing and shouting that the whole village understood, while the use of the term Big Bro signaled the start of their new bond. As the evaluations moved forward, Kaiza excitedly announced that his turn had finally arrived, while Rita coolly noted she was only getting her skills appraised to satisfy her father's request. As the young man approached the table, Clay noted they were the final two remaining and directed Kaiza to place his hand on the board. Kaiza followed the instruction, but a sudden sense of unease gripped Clay as he silently hoped the process would go smoothly. As he pressed his palm firmly against the surface, a brilliant light surged from the board and completely enveloped his hand. As the results manifested before them, Kaiza was revealed to be a magic swordsman, while Rita earned the title of high-ranking magic toolmaster, leaving both of them in stunned silence. Breaking the silence, Kaiza questioned the nature of the magic swordsman class, wondering if it was actually a powerful skill. Rita admitted she had no experience crafting magic tools, and Kaiza eventually turned to Clay, demanding an explanation for his mysterious skill seed. Stunned by the discovery, Clay struggled to find his voice before finally confirming that Kaiza's magic swordsman ability was actually a high-rank skill seed. Regaining his composure, he explained that a magic swordsman is a composite class born from the fusion of swordsmanship and sorcery, noting that both base skills possess high-ranking advanced forms, Great Swordsman and Great Sorcerer. He further explained that the magic swordsman class was a fusion of two elite forms, Great Swordsman and Great Sorcerer, prompting Clay to admit he had never encountered such a skill before. He beamed with a triumphant fist, thrilled by his incredible skill despite not fully understanding it. Seeing this, a relieved Clay decided it was finally time to tell Kaiza the truth. He explains the immense potential of Kaiza's skill, noting that the emergence of a magic swordsman would cause a massive sensation in the capital. This exceptionally rare skill seed is a powerful asset, one that could realistically lead to the rank of Knight Captain. He cautioned that disclosing this information would likely subject them to grueling training. Turning his focus to Rita, he revealed that her ability was just as formidable, a high-ranking magic toolmaster seed, a discovery she greeted with a weary sigh. She asked for confirmation regarding her talent for magic tool crafting, to which he agreed, noting that masters of the craft often acquire a diverse range of skills over time. She found herself overwhelmed by the vast array of disciplines before her, from alchemy and potion brewing to the intricate arts of magic tool creation and formation design. He proposed a practical first step, crafting magic tools for Glance to sell, though Rita hesitated, admitting she still hadn't fully grasped the extent of her new capabilities. Sensing her hesitation, he offers to teach her the fundamentals himself, revealing his own proficiency in crafting magic tools and leaving her completely speechless. After a brief pause, she turns away and politely declines, stating that she is content with things as they are, which leaves him visibly caught off guard. When he asks if she's certain, she offers a faint, melancholic smile and confirms her choice, explaining that she refuses to force herself into a situation she isn't ready for yet. The focus returns to Kaiza as Clay announces an immediate revision to the boys' training plan, intending to integrate magic alongside his swordsmanship. Initially stunned by the possibility of using magic, Kiza's shock quickly transforms into pure excitement as he eagerly expresses his desire to try. The boy rushes to his father, Alzam, to excitedly announce his potential as a mage, while Clay watches the pair from a distance with a quiet, thoughtful expression. As he watched the villagers, observing Kiza eagerly boasting to his father and Rita standing quietly nearby, a realization struck him that something was off, as the skill seeds they possessed were far too powerful to be ordinary. Reflecting on what he'd learned, he realized how rare it was for an entire community to possess such high-level skills, leading him to wonder if the residents of Emil village had unknowingly met some secret requirement. As Clay reflected on this, the village chief remarked that if he'd possessed such potential in his youth, he would have built a mansion in the capital by now, before playfully calling Clay a fool. Surveying the gathering, he realized that regardless of their motives for the gifts, these borderland villagers represented a significant pool of potential talent, a realization that would prove to be vital information. With this realization, he began weighing his options, considering whether to reach out to Yuka for advice. He recalled a nobleman in the capital mentioning that the second prince lacked the political support of his older brother, which was why he had been dispatched to the frontier to handle the Demon King. To his surprise, the man he had intended to contact, Second Prince Yuka Fargas Altonia, was already present and expressed his desire to recruit talented individuals for the nation's future. Alzam remained skeptical, fearing his son was caught up in another questionable situation. But after witnessing Kiza's deep admiration for the prince, he began to accept that the boy might have finally found a worthy mentor. After several days had passed, Clay ventured solo into the thick wilderness on the edge of the borderlands. He moved with a clear sense of purpose, determined to uncover the truth behind that day's events. He needed to understand why a creature like the red grizzly, known for its taquiza, had ventured out from the borderlands in the first place. He pressed further inward, aware that the borderlands' heavy magical saturation typically prevented the creatures within the miasma from ever leaving. Following his investigation, Alsam returned to the villagers to report that while goblin swarms had become a frequent nuisance, the appearance of a creature as formidable as a red grizzly from the borderlands was completely unprecedented. As he processed the revelation, his expression darkened, realizing that something truly unprecedented was unfolding within the borderlands. His mind drifts back to the moment he found them bloodied and barely alive, knowing that if he had arrived even a moment later, the road he built to prevent such tragedies would have been for nothing. With renewed resolve, he presses forward, determined to find the source of the disturbance and put an end to it. Deep in the borderlands, Claire carves a trail through the thick forest, his blade glinting as he slices through a massive tree trunk with raw power. Standing over the massive horned beast he had just defeated, he surveyed the surroundings and confirmed that he had reached the right location. After taking down the beast, he set up a small camp to roast a large cut of its meat over a crackling fire. While he rested, he reflected on how far he had traveled into the borderlands, though their true scale still remained a mystery to him. His dinner was cut short when he spotted a faint, rhythmic glow emanating from a dark gap between the ancient trees nearby. Without warning, the light detonated into a violent explosion, sending a surge of dark energy ripping through the forest. Jays remained perfectly still with a stern expression, his focus entirely fixed on the origin of the blast. With a simple lift of his hand, he effortlessly manifested a shimmering circular barrier that repelled the incoming wave of dark energy. With the barrier remaining stable, he reflected on the results and considered how to properly calibrate the power output. His training, however, hadn't gone unobserved, as a tall and elegant woman stepped out from the forest shadows, her silent approach catching him completely off guard. Her features were striking, and he immediately noticed her otherworldly beauty and long pointed ears, realizing she was an elf. She met his gaze with an unreadable expression, breaking the silence as Clay gestured toward the meal he had prepared, asking if she was capable of eating monster meat. He offered a welcoming smile, gesturing toward the table set with 2 plates and mugs as an invitation to join him for a meal. Her initial hesitation began to fade as she admitted she had only intended to watch over him while he rested, but since he had offered an invitation, she was happy to join him. As they started their meal, he chewed slowly while reflecting on the sudden turn of events. He watched her eat with a quiet grace, the surrounding flowers making their simple campsite feel almost like a royal garden. The entire situation felt surreal, as he never imagined he would encounter an elf in these remote borderlands. Yet a flicker of doubt remained, as he wondered if she had been targeting him only moments earlier. Sensing his intuition, she clarified that she had only been observing him before asking if he believed elves were exclusive to the sacred tree country of Elfra. He confirmed this was the general consensus, adding that it was just as rare to find a human traveling through this particular region. He was caught off guard by her blunt confession about the surveillance, suddenly realizing they hadn't even exchanged names despite sharing a meal. Clay took the lead by introducing himself, explaining that he was a humble villager looking to farm the surrounding land. She introduced herself as Charlotte of the Vertit tribe, revealing that she was an elf from the nearby area, a disclosure that left Clay completely speechless. Stunned by her claim, he struggled to believe she actually lived in such a remote borderland, but Charlotte confirmed it, gesturing toward the dense, dark woods to explain that her home lay much deeper within the forest than his isolated camp. With a gentle smile, Charlotte explains that the forest is home to far more inhabitants than most humans realize. Stunned, he questioned if demons truly inhabited the area, leading Charlotte to confirm that elves, beastmen, and demons all lived in these lands. She further explained that many nations enslaved other races, with long-lived elves being particularly prized for their vitality. She went on to explain that in the demon lands, humans aren't even regarded as enemies. They are simply prey, hunted the moment they're spotted. As the truth about this borderlands finally sets in, Charlotte explains that the territory serves as a sanctuary for races exiled by humanity, calmly noting that the lack of humans is its greatest appeal. Seated across from him, she admits that life in the borderlands is a constant struggle, explaining that one must ultimately decide which threat to face, humans or monsters. She explained that her people had simply chosen the lesser of two evils, before noting that he and his companions were also there to cultivate the frontier, just as her own race had been doing through their own unique methods. Stunned by the news, he realized his goal of creating a haven for his allies was complicated by the fact that other races had already settled the territory long ago. A cold realization suddenly strikes him. To a refugee fleeing human persecution, he must look like just another intruder, leading him to wonder if she has been watching him this entire time as a threat to her hard-won home. He tentatively asks why she's cultivating the land, but her response catches him off guard. She explains that his presence is genuinely terrifying, admitting that she originally mistook him for an assassin sent to eliminate them. Clearly flustered, he denies being a threat and maintains that he only came to investigate with no intention of fighting, leading Charlotte to thoughtfully concede that he might be telling the truth. As Charlotte continued her explanation, she questioned if he was truly oblivious to the massive swarm of spirits surrounding him, noting that to the elves, his mere presence was considered a threat. Prompted by her words, he scanned his surroundings and finally noticed the air was filled with glowing orbs and ethereal, butterfly-like spirits, leaving him in a state of utter bewilderment. He turned his head away in stunned silence, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple as he processed the revelation. Finding his voice, he argued that he couldn't have possibly known, questioning if only elves with their innate spirit magic were capable of perceiving such entities. He understood that humans weren't supposed to see spirits, and though Torita had mentioned his natural talent before, hearing it confirmed by an elf, a race inherently linked to the spirit realm, made the reality impossible to ignore. He naturally questioned why so many spirits were drawn to him, leading Charlotte to explain the history of a clan known as the Spirit's Beloved Children. Much like him, they possessed the rare ability to attract spirits in overwhelming numbers. She explained that when a woman from her clan experienced strong emotions, the spirits would mirror her feelings by altering the weather, triggering heavy downpours or intense heat waves. Clay listened, though he found the claim hard to believe. The narrative takes a grim turn as Charlotte reveals that the woman ultimately exploded, leaving a massive crater several kilometers wide in her wake. Clay is left stunned by the scale of the destruction, noting that such a power is far too dangerous to exist. She drove the point home, asking if he finally understood the need for her caution, It was only natural to be wary of a man who was essentially a walking bomb lingering near her home, and a troubled Clay found himself unable to argue with her reasoning. Not wanting to be a nuisance, he asked if there was anything he could do to ease her worries. He then slid a thick, ornate bracelet across the table as a potential solution, while Charlotte stared down at the gift with an unreadable expression. She listened as he introduced the item as his spirit bracelet, explaining that it allows even those without magical talent to make requests of the spirits before formally asking her to accept it. Seeking confirmation, he asked if the spirits would now follow his lead. Once she agreed, he realized the bracelet finally gave him the power to issue direct commands. Surprised by her unexpected kindness, he asked if she had traveled all that way just to bring him the item. She confirmed it, explaining that she was simply acting on her honest assessment of his character. Flustered but grateful, he accepted the tool. He reached out and firmly grasped the ornate diamond-patterned bracelet. Believing her work was finished, she prepared to take her leave, but he stopped her with one final question regarding any unusual changes in the surrounding area. Noticing her confusion, he clarifies that he wasn't talking about himself, explaining instead that a red grizzly has recently surfaced in the nearby fox forest. Hearing about the beast, her expression shifts to one of recognition as she confirms the recent sightings of a powerful monster nearby, prompting him to ask if she has any idea what could be causing its appearance. She admitted her uncertainty, and when he apologized for being unable to assist, she dismissed his concerns before formally introducing herself as Charlie. He met her introduction with a warm smile and asked if she would be open to meeting again in the future. Enveloped in a swirling light, she agreed to the arrangement before departing, though she left him with a single condition for their next encounter. She vanished as quickly as she had appeared, leaving only a sharp breeze in her wake while Clay remained seated, watching her disappear into the trees. Watching the spot where she had vanished, he noted with curiosity that despite her immense power, she lacked any real killing intent, as if she had completely botched her execution. Looking down at the bracelet she had gifted him, he realized that despite her friendly attitude, he couldn't afford to trust her quite yet. While sitting alone in the quiet clearing, he reflected on their shared situation, thinking that as fellow outcasts, it might be beneficial for them to get along. Meanwhile, deeper within the forest, as Charlotte walked alone, her thoughts drifted to Claire's. She recognized his formidable power but felt no immediate threat from him. Her expression hardened with determination as she realized there was no room for error. Every potential threat had to be eliminated. Keeping that thought in mind, she pushed forward through the thick forest. She came to a halt, her composure finally breaking as she admitted the truth. The red grizzly had been driven from its home by an even stronger monster that had invaded her territory, and she found herself unable to escape. Her journey eventually led her to a massive ancient tree, which stood with an imposing and overwhelming presence. Her memories drifted back to the cause of her exile, a massive, winged demon shrouded in shadows that had once towered over her. Recalling her sheer terror, she thought of the human and the man, still questioning what could have drawn such a creature there. Back at the village, the morning calm was interrupted by a sudden bustle as residents gathered in small groups, whispering their theories and concerns. The source of the commotion was a woman with long, flowing hair and an ornate staff, who calmly explained she had been left behind by the Shinto Priest Association. Nearby, Aldzam questioned a villager about the stir, learning that a beautiful visitor from the capital named Flora had arrived specifically seeking Clay. 3 years after the Demon King's defeat, a group of heroes arrived at a remote borderland orphanage. While the other children cheered for their return, a young boy named Kaito silently watched them approach. Miss Yuka comforts the excited children, explaining that with the local monsters defeated, they are finally free to play outside. As the kids cheer in gratitude, Clay asks Flora if she is the one sponsoring the orphanage, and she modestly confirms that she's simply doing what she can to help. Her expression hardened as Clay challenged her approach, arguing that simply eliminating monsters should be enough. He insisted that their true mission was to defeat the Demon King, and that everyone would be better off if they focused exclusively on that singular, efficient goal. Laura listened in silence, her expression distant as she eventually admitted that, from a strictly efficient standpoint, the reasoning was sound. Yuka continued to speak with a warm smile, explaining that because their lives would persist day after day, they needed to look beyond the present and accept assistance for the sake of their future. Turning her attention back to Clay with an earnest expression, Flora explains her personal philosophy. To her, saving people is about more than just defeating monsters or providing food and medicine. It's about giving them hope and a reason to feel that being alive is truly worthwhile. The following morning, a loud knocking rings through the small building, jolting Kaido awake as Alzum, the man with the scarred eye, pounds on his door. Opening the door, he found an irritated Alzum, who grumbled about the early hour before getting straight to the point. Kaido had a visitor. Someone had arrived late the previous night specifically to see him, leaving Kaido caught off guard and questioning who it could possibly be. He explained that he only caught a fleeting glimpse of the figure, describing her as a blonde woman resembling a church priestess, which only left Kaido more perplexed. In another part of the village, a man wearing a bandana shouts in disbelief while showing his friends that an old wound has completely vanished, just as a pair of glowing hands pull away from his restored skin. Filled with gratitude, an elderly villager asks Flora if she's truly certain about refusing payment, but she reassures him that she helped simply out of her own goodwill. Smiling warmly, she explained that the gift was a small gesture of gratitude for their hospitality, especially considering her sudden and unannounced arrival. Observing from a distance, Clay watched her interact with the locals, cynically noting her resemblance to a compassionate shrine maiden. His scrutiny was cut short by a look of genuine surprise as he quietly uttered Flora's name. The protagonists are soon surrounded by the grateful townspeople, as men, women, and children gather around with expressions of pure joy and admiration. Observing the scene, a faint smile touched his lips as he realized that, in this regard, she hadn't changed at all. He finally approaches her, calling out her name and scolding her for the delay. Flora turns in surprise as he demands to know why she has come there. Concerned by how much he had been overexerting himself since his return, she urged him to get some rest, but he immediately prioritized asking if his work was being handled. She brushes off his concerns, explaining that the church's authority remains intact, regardless of who delivers the sermon, making her absence irrelevant. Clay is left flustered, realizing she traveled all this way specifically for him, only to be told to keep quiet. Leaning in close with a fierce expression, Flora made it clear she was more than just a shrine maiden and shouldn't be treated as one. She commanded him to stay silent and listen to her as an individual, leaving a stunned Clay with no choice but to comply. He gestured toward the woods, asking about her plans and suggesting they head to her place. Flora agreed with a confident smile, promising to show him exactly what her borderland development work involved. She led him to a clearing where a sturdy house stood nestled among the ancient trees, causing him to stop in his tracks, momentarily speechless at the unexpected sight. Approaching the home, Flora explained she had it built for simple convenience, but she soon paused as she sensed a shift in the air. Although she had felt the borderlands' desolation from the village, she now realized the magical energy present was far more overwhelming than she ever expected. She observed that these lands are accessible only to the truly powerful, noting with approval how Clay had stabilized the ambient magical energy surrounding the house. He admitted that while the construction was a hassle, his goal was to provide a space for Kiza, Rita, and the rest of the village children, causing Flora's expression to soften as she listened intently. She then recalled his own words, reminding him that his goal for the borderlands was to build a peaceful home for them all, catching him by surprise as he quietly acknowledged the truth. Her expression grows serious as she highlights the well-built road they traveled on, noting that this was a detail neither she, Yuka, nor Tiritas would have ever considered. Looking perplexed, he questioned her motives, but Flora remained undeterred, revealing she had learned from the locals that he had personally inspected the skill seed of every person in the village. Leaning in with an intense gaze, she explained that his focus on the road, the skill seed investigation, and his recent judgments were all unnecessary for the straightforward task of developing the borderlands. Her accusation hits him with unexpected force, leaving him stunned and silent as the weight of her words finally sinks in. He stayed silent as Flora smiled, noting how much he had come to care for the villagers. Looking down, he softly admitted that he had indeed grown attached. Looking up with a gentle expression, he conceded that she might actually be right. Gesturing toward the house, He explained that its construction was only possible thanks to his disciple, which caused Flora to call out in a panic, asking who this person was and what their future held if he weren't around. The following morning, Clay, Flora, Yuka, and Rita convened around a table inside their newly finished home. Flora cheerfully detailed her history with Clay, making Rita realize they had met back in the capital, a connection she confirmed with a warm smile before formally introducing herself to everyone. Noticing Rita's blush, Flora suddenly grabbed her and began venting loudly, frustrated that Clay hadn't sent a single letter during his entire month at the capital. Clay overheard the exchange and noted how quickly they were becoming acquainted, while Rita stepped in to defend him, telling Flora she didn't believe he was actually a cold-hearted person. In reality, Clay had struggled deeply with the task, sitting among a pile of discarded drafts as he failed to find the right words for Flora. Convinced she was far too busy to be bothered by his letters, he hoped that the mere act of writing and discarding his attempts would somehow make up for his long silence. Back in the present, Flora's question snapped Clay out of his thoughts as she pointed out that he had actually sent a letter to Yuka, leaving him visibly stunned and at a loss for words. Stammering in surprise, he asks how she found out, prompting Flora to lean in and explain that Yuka had grown worried after receiving his letter and decided to inform her. She then points out that if he is concerned about their schedules, Yuka is actually far busier than she is. He tries to brush the situation off as a mere formal report on Yuka's political affairs, but as Rita stays silent, Flora comments on their obvious closeness, a sentiment Clay reinforces by noting they've been traveling together for 4 years. Their exchange caught the attention of everyone else in the room, leading Alzum to interject from across the table and ask if it was truly just the two of them. The unexpected question left both Flora and Rita looking on with visible surprise. Alsa kept a stern expression, while Clay seemed baffled by the sudden question, and Kiza watched the interaction with curiosity. Flora offered a gentle smile as she clarified that they did indeed have another companion traveling with them, though she admitted the situation was a bit of a shame. Pisa was stunned, imagining Clay's companions as a group of elite nobles and beautiful women, finding his lifestyle increasingly peculiar. Meanwhile, Yuka chimed in, noting that Flora was actually the one who had undergone the most change. He mentioned that she used to call Clay Big Brother, a revelation that left Clay genuinely surprised. In response, Flora playfully pinched Yuka's cheek to quiet him down. Rubbing his cheek, he added that he had even taken her on as his disciple, prompting Flora to turn toward him with a knowing expression as if she already sensed where his story was leading. The tone of the conversation shifts as Alzum clarifies his motives, revealing that his investigation into the skill shield was actually intended to uncover the nature of Key's training. Seeing an opening, Flora offers her expertise in magic to assist him and asks which specific type of skill shield he is looking for. Her offer leaves Clay visibly unsettled, causing him to hesitate with a troubled expression as he weighs the potential consequences. Laura clutched her head in disbelief, wide-eyed and breaking into a cold sweat as she struggled to process the weight of what she had just learned. In the meantime, Alzum, Kaido, and Rita were notified of their new classifications, officially becoming a guardian warrior, a magic swordsman, and a high-class magic toolmaster. Suddenly, she spoke up to protest, arguing that since a rare shield skill only appears in 1 out of every 100,000 people, it would be impossible for 3 to exist in a single village. While Alzum watched her with a skeptical expression. Clay explains that despite their differences, every villager possesses a skill shield linked to the capital's power. When Four asks for clarification, a troubled Clay reveals his theory that these shields are actually fueled by magic. He continues by theorizing that the quality of a skill shield is determined by the magic density of one's birthplace. Alzum suggests that the same potent magic in the forest responsible for spawning powerful beasts could explain the villagers' unique abilities, concluding that humans are subject to this same environmental influence. Laura realizes that if the theory holds, Emil Village is a perilous breeding ground for exceptional skill shields, a revelation that leaves the group stunned. Alzum, looking somber, acknowledges the gravity of the situation and admits he's genuinely unsettled. His terror quickly shifted into anger as he seized Clay, demanding to know why he hadn't mentioned their incredible shield skills sooner, though Clay reminded him that he'd already shared that information when they last parted. He sternly emphasized that if word got out about the superior skill shields in Emil village, the consequences would be unpredictable. He warned of forced relocations or even the possibility that the royal family and nobility would move to destroy the village entirely. With a faint smile, he admitted the real issue was that the skill shields were actually too effective, expressing his relief that they finally understood after worrying they had simply labeled him a pessimist. His expression turned solemn once more as he questioned whether he should have shared the knowledge of crafting magic tools with them. Turning to Rita with a serious expression, he spoke to her directly while she sat on the edge of the bed, staring straight ahead as she processed his words. He explained that her shield skill was simply too remarkable to ignore, prompting Alzam to point out with concern that she had already mastered the Guardian Warrior's techniques. Clay acknowledged this, revealing his plan for her to train as a magic swordsman, much like Alzam's instruction of Kiza, as he believed it was vital for her to grasp the true extent of her own power. Blushing deeply, she averted her gaze and struggled to find her words, only able to manage a few stammers as she faced him. In truth, she had never given much thought to such things, as she lacked any grand ambitions beyond simply continuing her quiet, peaceful life in the village. A new voice suddenly broke her train of thought as a woman with a knowing smile suggested it was disrespectful to both Clay and Kiza for Rita to receive such expert instruction without any personal ambition, especially since she had no intention of becoming a magic tool master. Surprised by the suggestion, Rita looked up to find the woman still smiling as she offered a simple alternative. If Rita didn't have a specific dream, she should focus on becoming the person she aspired to be, implying that such a goal was well within her reach. Inside a brightly lit room, Kaito, Rita, Alzam, Kiza, and the confident woman gathered around a table to deliberate on their future paths. While the conversation progressed, Rita grew introspective, feeling out of her element yet ultimately deciding she had to take the chance. Noticing her hesitation, the woman offered some gentle guidance, explaining that Kaito's suggestion was only one of many potential paths for Rita's future. She reassured her that even if she eventually chose not to become a magic tool craftsman, the experience would still be a valuable asset. Edo intervened, explaining that his appraisal skill confirmed her aptitude was far too high to be limited to a single role. The woman agreed, noting that the objective was simply to provide her with more future opportunities, while Rita listened with a thoughtful expression. Reassured by their support, Rita's doubts faded as a new resolve took hold, leading her to look up and firmly announce her desire to begin crafting magic tools. Having made her choice, the woman gave a confident smile and declared the matter resolved, prompting Kaido to turn toward Keiza and Alzam for their decision. Keiza was visibly stunned, surprised to find himself included in the arrangement. Elaborating on his reasoning, Kaido explained that the path of a magic swordsman offered more versatility than Alzam realized, noting that his talent for both shield arts and magic would allow him to master the basics of magic tool creation quickly. Alzam paused at those words, stroking his chin as he recalled Kaido mentioning this before. Even so, the prospect of learning magic at his age still felt surreal to him. Taito met the man's skepticism with a firm reassurance, insisting that talent can be cultivated at any time as long as one acknowledges it. After emphasizing that it was never too late, the woman suggested that Alzam and Kiza could begin their training together. Once the group was assembled, Kaido stood and spoke with firm resolve, announcing that their training would begin immediately in a basement workshop he had already prepared. He laid the smooth wooden board onto the workshop table, followed by a finely crafted pen that settled beside it with a soft clack. As Rita examined the board with curiosity, he explained it was crafted from trantwood and asked if she was familiar with the material. Before she could speak, Kiza jumped in to identify the creature as a tree-type monster, which Kaido confirmed, noting that he'd kept the material for some time since treants aren't found in the local area. He explained that wood harvested from a borderlands treant contains such immense magical power that it's nearly impossible for a novice to control, though its high potency makes specific sections of the timber ideal for crafting combat-oriented magic tools. Alzam observed that material compatibility was a key factor, which Kaido confirmed by explaining that creating magic tools requires a thorough examination of each component's unique properties. He then questioned the others about their need for study, comparing the pursuit of knowledge to swordsmanship, where mastering forms and techniques is a discipline in its own right. With the core principles explained, he assigned the day's task, crafting an ignition magic tool, emphasizing its practicality for both domestic life and long-distance travel. He returned the tool to the table and instructed everyone to replicate the magic circle on their own boards with the highest level of precision. He held up the pen, explaining that a magic circle is drawn with one's own mana rather than ink, requiring a perfectly steady flow of energy that demands incredible precision and control. He explained that these custom-made pens were designed to automatically draw and release a fixed amount of mana from the user. Consequently, he instructed them to ignore power regulation for the day and focus entirely on the precision of their magic circles. As the lesson begins, the woman praises Kaido's self-regulating pen as a remarkable invention, and Alzum agrees as he examines his own, noting that it effortlessly handles the complex magic manipulation that often causes students to give up after 6 months of struggling. A short time later, Rita announced she was finished, prompting Kaido to inspect her work on the wooden board. He was impressed, noting that the nearly flawless magic circle was more than ready to be activated, which a hopeful Rita asked him to confirm. He suggested they put it to the test, carefully setting a small magic stone into the designated slot beside the circle with a faint click. The stone instantly triggers the inscription, causing a small, controlled flame to flicker to life on the board as Rita watches in wide-eyed amazement, her hands clasped tightly together. She gazed at the flame in awe of her success, while Kaido smiled, confirming that she had drawn the magic formation perfectly. He noted that although this level of magic typically requires extensive training, her ability to succeed on the very first attempt was a clear testament to her natural talent. Her eyes shimmered in the magical glow, reflecting the deep sense of pride and achievement she felt. He took a moment to observe her quiet and sincere reaction. Once she had finished celebrating her success, he explained that the final step involved cutting the piece from the board, which would cause the flame to go out. Rita then shyly asked if she could keep the item as a memento, and he was more than happy to agree. Inspired, Rita suggests they craft tools for the entire village as practice, an idea Kaido eagerly supports. While Alzum admires Rita's precision, Keiza grumbles in frustration as his own work continues to turn out distorted. Approaching Kaido with her glowing magic tool, the woman reveals her plan to transition into craftsmanship, noting that she'll need a new livelihood once she resigns. This leaves Kaido stunned as he realizes her intention to leave the church is actually serious. A few days later, as he walked with a confident woman, she noted that while Rita and Keiza's magical control had improved, they were still far from proficient. Nevertheless, she admitted that almost everyone was now capable of drawing magic circles. She offered a faint smile, noting how impressive it was to see him teaching others while simultaneously crafting tools, prompting him to look away. They descended a long stone staircase, illuminated by the soft, steady glow of enchanted lamps. Strolling through the glowing grounds, the woman pointed out how extravagant it was to use monster-repelling magic for simple streetlights, to which he replied that he wanted to eliminate even the smallest threat to the village's safety. While she recognized the utility of the streetlights, she argued that land development was the more critical project. After he confirmed they were slowly expanding their borders, she pressed him to reveal the main obstacle holding them back. Sergei's focus sharpened as she shared her theory, suggesting she knew exactly why he was unable to move forward with the development. Noticing a faint glow emanating from the band on his wrist, he looked up and wondered if she was referring to the curse affecting his arm. Nodding in agreement, he explained that removing the cursed armlet wouldn't be a problem, but his tone shifted as he questioned if she was the rumored elf from the borderlands, causing her to lose her composure and demand an explanation. Raising his arm to reveal a softly glowing band, he explained that it was the armlet of spirits, which the elf Charlotte had told him reacted to the massive gathering of spirits around him. He further explained that Charlotte had tasked him with using the armlet to disperse the spirit buildup, though he admitted he couldn't verify the situation since he was unable to see the spirits himself. He was certain of only one thing: the armlet he wore possessed a singular, specific power, as the air around him began to shimmer with the countless invisible spirits he had previously noted. As she processed his explanation about the spirit from the borderlands seeking separation, she realized she needed to verify the truth for herself. Recalling her previous meeting with the elf, Charlotte, she decided a follow-up conversation was essential. Meanwhile, Kaido was preoccupied with his own dilemma. Although he had hoped to never see Charlotte again, the cursed armlet forced his hand, leaving him with no choice but to seek her out immediately. Standing resolute under the moonlight, he made his decision and announced that he would set out to find the elven settlement the following day. His sudden declaration immediately caught the confident woman's interest, and with a determined grin, she insisted on joining his adventure, leaving Kaido stunned by her rapid enthusiasm. When he asked if she had any complaints, she explained that she hadn't come all this way just to relax, but to be by his side. With a slight blush, she corrected herself, admitting her real goal was to have fun with Clay, then earnestly asked if he would let her join him. Stunned into silence, he could only stare back as she waited for his reaction with visible anticipation. After a brief hesitation, he finally relented and agreed to go together, prompting an enthusiastic response from her as they both ventured into the woods. Venturing deep into the borderlands, the group eventually reached Vetophones, an elven settlement built high among the massive trunks and sprawling branches of ancient trees. Inside one of the treetop dwellings, a dark-haired elven man peered out the window while informing Charlotte that it was finally time for her punishment. Melville, the elder of Vetophones, turned toward her with a sorrowful expression and offered an apology, but Charlotte remained calm as she told her uncle that she understood. Standing before Elder Melville, she is informed that her path to atonement begins now. He reminds her that this is her honorable duty, and she softly gives her consent. After their conversation, she walked away along a massive tree branch used as a path. As she left, a somber Melville called out to Charlotte to wish her a good morning, while other elves along the way offered their own greetings. As she continues on her way, a young elf asks if she is on duty, while a dark-haired woman beside him softly warns her to be careful. Charlotte offers them a reassuring smile and expresses her gratitude for their concern. Her journey takes her deeper into the massive branches of the World Tree, a divine entity worshipped by the elves that houses their entire settlement within its colossal form. Looking up at the vast canopy, she reflected on the World Tree's cycle, how it absorbs elven magic to provide the settlement with vital resources, though this long-standing balance had recently shifted. A massive red-scaled dragon, distinguished by a third eye on its forehead, suddenly tore through the dense foliage. Approximately a month has passed since this black dragon first appeared and began consuming the World Tree. The aftermath of the battle was catastrophic, leaving behind fallen soldiers and ruined homes. With no other options left, they decided to bait the black dragon using the World Tree's magic, a risky final attempt to bring the beast down. Just as the dragon lunges forward with a roar, small buds of pure magic sprout from a nearby branch, leaving the bait in place. Watching from a distance, Elder Melville observed the confrontation begin with an expression of grim resolve. Despite his desperate cries for her to stop, it was already too late. Charlotte unleashed a blinding surge of energy, demanding that the foolish dragon perish. The beast moves with incredible speed, effortlessly dodging the blast and looming over the terrified elf with a cruel smile. Realizing her attack was completely ineffective, Charlotte collapsed in despair, only for Kaito to arrive moments later, calling out her name in alarm. Overwhelmed by fear, she broke down in tears, desperately pleading for someone to come to her rescue. Meanwhile, the scene shifts toward the grand and imposing royal capital in a distant land. Inside his grand office, Duke Conrad sat at his desk, meticulously reviewing a stack of official documents. Clicking his tongue in annoyance while reviewing a report, he expressed his frustration over how quickly the commoners appointed by the second prince were achieving results. Continuing his grievances to a shadowed figure, he noted that Hiro Yuka's origins were being called into question as the church dispatched priests to the borderlands, allowing citizens to appeal judgments and sparking widespread debate. Frustrated, he slammed his fist against the desk, scoffing at the hero who defeated the Demon King being treated like a fool and deciding they would simply have to wait and see for now. His anger faded into a dark smile as he decided to let the commoners enjoy their brief moment of glory. Since the most influential nobles were already backing the first prince, He knew that everything would be settled once the mock battle came to an end. He anticipated the mock battle would be a massive spectacle designed to draw in the public. Regarding the event as an entertaining festival, he turned to his hidden associate and asked for an update on their progress. Smirking knowingly, he asked his accomplice if they had successfully retrieved what they discovered underground, as the hooded figure revealed a muscular captive bound in heavy chains. Confirming their success, the hooded figure watched as the various threads of the plot began to intertwine. With Prince Yuka reviewing his plans, Charlotte still shaken by her encounter, and Kaido standing ready, the conspirator declared that every path was now converging toward a single, inevitable outcome. As they enter a sunlit clearing, Kaido and Floor are suddenly confronted by a massive, pig-headed creature wielding a colossal axe, causing Kaido to cry out Floor's name in alarm. In response, she thrusts her hands forward to manifest a holy barrier, and while the monster's axe shatters against the golden light, the shield itself cracks under the force but manages to hold. Capitalizing on the creature's failed strike, Kaido leaped into the air and delivered a heavy downward blow, carving a deep wound across its back. Sometime after the battle, the group resumed their journey. Flora pointed out that since entering the borderlands, they had encountered nothing but monsters, with no sign of the elves they were searching for. Kido, patting a large slab of meat he had stored away, remarked that it was about time they finally found them. She comments on their successful monster hunts, noting how delicious the great orc meat was and even hoping for more. Kaido, however, is worried they'll end up with more than they can consume, fearing they might be stuck with a year's supply of nothing but orc meat. Laura suggests offering the supply to Elmville Village, giving Kaido pause as he wonders if the villagers would even want monster meat or if it would even be edible. He recalled Tarita's mention of distant lands where people actually consume goblins, a revelation that left Flora pale with disgust as she frantically demanded to know if it was true. He explains that their pungent odor makes them inedible in their current state, but soaking them in a blend of spices and liquids can neutralize the scent. Meanwhile, Flora is left horrified, arguing that the smell is the least of her concerns. Remembering Torita's claim that goblin meat pairs well with alcohol, Kaito expressed interest in trying the recipe, only for Flora to exasperatedly reveal that Torita had been eating it all alone, a realization that struck Kaito with sudden clarity. Their conversation is cut short when a powerful presence descends upon the forest, causing Flora to call out his name in concern. Kaito looks up through the trees, his expression hardening as he realizes the source of the massive aura is a dragon. He and Flora stood their ground as the massive three-eyed dragon Ma-gape descended upon them. As the beast's shadow loomed overhead, Flora raised her hand to prepare a defensive measure. The creature landed with a heavy thud, but Flora remained composed as she asked for his opinion. He calmly remarked that encountering a black dragon was quite a rare sight. Keeping his eyes fixed on the creature, he wondered aloud if it might actually be delicious, though Flora admitted she had no idea since she had never tasted a black dragon. Abruptly, the dragon takes flight once more, leaving him to wonder if it's retreating or preparing for an aerial strike. Flora, however, considers this a grave mistake, confident that her impenetrable barrier will allow her to teach the beast a lesson. A vast, shimmering dome of magic materializes around them, causing the dragon to slam into the invisible barrier with a heavy thud and a look of pure shock. Flora notes that the situation is proving to be more troublesome than she originally anticipated. Although momentarily stunned, the dragon remains in the fight, hovering as it unleashes a torrent of black flames. While Flora identifies the nature of the breath, Kaido focuses his senses, his left eye glowing as he begins to appraise the incoming strike. His analysis uncovers the true nature of the blast, a dark attribute magical attack, far more lethal than a standard breath weapon. He realizes the dragon is deliberately refining its magic to maximize the power behind the strike. A predatory grin spreads across his face as dark energy swirls around his mouth. After reflecting on the sensation, he finally activates his mimicry ability. Opening his mouth, he unleashed a matching torrent of black flames that perfectly mirrored the dragon's breath, leaving the beast to stare in wide-eyed disbelief at the impossible sight. The dark energies collide in a massive explosion, hurling the dragon backward with a scorched jaw as it lets out a pained cry. The injured dragon glared at Kaito, sensing a potent miasma and accusing him of taking many lives to obtain such an aura, even as a mysterious pattern began to swirl within Kaido's eyes. Stepping up beside him with his sword drawn, Clay flashed a chilling smile and told the beast it was unfortunate to have crossed them, promising to devour it entirely so it could finally rest in peace. Incensed by the threat, the three-eyed dragon let out a fierce roar and lunged forward with its jaws wide open. Clay held his position, raising his sword to meet the beast's charge while Kaido observed from behind. The creature's momentum failed, and its massive body hit the ground with a thunderous crash, leaving Kaido standing solitary amidst the rising dust and smoke. A short while later, Flora approached Kaido with a warm smile and gently commended him for his hard work. Gazing up at her, he reflected on the battle, acknowledging that her ability to maintain a massive, complex barrier while simultaneously fending off the black dragon was a feat even his mimicry skill couldn't duplicate. Laura beamed with pride, noting that such strength was only natural for the Saintess, and admitting that even she found the technique mesmerizing each time she performed it. While roasting dragon meat over a crackling fire, she pointed eagerly at a skewer and asked which part he thought was the most delicious, leading Kaito to realize how easy it was to get along with her when food was involved. The soft light of their campfire flickered over the two of them, standing in sharp relief against the massive, dark silhouette of the slain dragon nearby. Taking a large bite, her face instantly lit up with joy as she proclaimed it the best dragon meat she had ever tasted, leading Kaido to ask if it was truly as good as she claimed. Kaido explains that while the dragon meat offers some restorative benefits, it is no substitute for a proper meal, so he suggests they finally seek out the elves he mentioned earlier. He believes a trek through the forest will be a refreshing change of pace after being cooped up for so long, and Flora readily agrees to set out. Their path eventually leads them to the base of a gargantuan tree, where an entire settlement thrives within its massive trunk and branches, the elven village of Vedofons. Standing among her people in the village, Charlotte felt a growing sense of unease as she realized the black dragon was long overdue for its return. An elven elder named Melville asked for Charlotte's input, and she admitted her growing concern over the dragon's disappearance. As she wondered where the creature could have gone, a young elf named Zaire suddenly rushed toward them, calling out for both Melville and Charlotte. Melville demanded an explanation, leading a winded Zaire to report that two humans had reached the settlement. Though the elder quickly brushed the news aside as nonsense, he questioned how humans could have bypassed the village's phantom barrier, only for Zaire to reveal that one of them wore the spirit subjugation bracelet, an item he recognized as a gift Charlotte had once given to another. Mentioning the bracelet sparks a sudden realization in Charlotte, bringing Claire's name instantly to the forefront of her mind. As Melville finally grasps the situation, he urges Charlotte to meet with the others, promising to guard the world tree while she is away. After Charlotte expresses her gratitude, Zaire steps in to guide her toward the entrance. Following the young elf's lead, Charlotte made her way to the village entrance where Kaido and Flora stood waiting for her. Noticing her approach, Kaito offers a cheerful wave and calls out her name, while Flora stands beside him, watching the reunion with a look of quiet surprise. Flora stepped forward with a warm smile, introducing herself to the elf as a priestess of the Creation Church and a friend of Clay, while Charlotte looked back at Kaido to confirm if they were traveling together. Switching to a more practical concern, she questioned how the pair had managed to enter the village, noting that a phantom barrier was supposed to prevent any intruders from crossing. He offhandedly explained that although he'd noticed the elven settlement, he hadn't given it much thought, focusing instead on analyzing and dismantling the barrier to pass through. Flora could only stare in disbelief, stunned by his nonchalant attitude. Changing the subject, she mentioned that they were planning to camp in the nearby forest since it was getting late, prompting Flora to ask if the settlement had an inn. However, Charlotte seemed at a loss for words. Stuttering, she finally managed to explain that staying there wasn't an option. Flora was caught off guard, asking if there wasn't even a treehouse they could use, while Kaido watched Charlotte, wondering why she was being so unusually formal. Her expression grew somber as she gestured toward a colossal tree visible through the woods, explaining that a great black dragon had claimed its peak and left the entire region in a state of constant peril. She explained that this was the reason humans were forbidden from staying, while Kaido peered toward the distant tree, skeptical of the black dragon's presence since he couldn't see anything. Standing nearby, Zaire explained that although the dragon had recently flown off, it was known to always return. With a grim expression, she explained that the beast relentlessly devours the world tree every day, refusing to leave until the tree has completely withered. Her grim announcement left Kaido and Flora in a stunned silence, with Kaido only able to manage a bewildered sound in response. As he stood frozen, processing the grim news, Flora leaned in with a sly grin, questioning if they were both thinking the exact same thing. He struggled to articulate his intentions to Flora, but his hesitation was cut short by Charlotte, who eagerly asked about the fate of the black dragon. Kaido trailed off, finding it difficult to explain the truth about himself and his companions. He announced his victory with a confident smile, leaving Charlotte, Zaire, and Flora in disbelief as Charlotte questioned him again to confirm if he had truly defeated the beast. The confirmation only intensified Charlotte's disbelief, causing her to recoil in horror as she questioned if he had actually consumed it. Flora, however, was practically glowing as she confirmed the news, making it clear that the evidence of his victory was now simply digesting in his stomach. The fallen dragon's massive body loomed over the gathering elves, its final rattling breaths the only sound breaking the heavy silence. From the edge of the forest, the elven leaders watched in shock as Elder Melville confirmed that the creature was indeed the black dragon, questioning how only two people could have managed such an incredible feat. Charlotte and Zaire's group stood in stunned silence, their eyes wide with shock as they stared at the defeated monster. Charlotte's voice trembles as she presses Kaido for confirmation on the black dragon's defeat, leaving him so caught off guard by her intensity that he stammers a reply while Flora watches the exchange in surprise. Tears of pure relief stream down her face as she explains that the disaster they all dreaded is finally over, freeing them from a life of despair. As her words sink in, the heavy burden of their long-held fear finally begins to lift. Zaire and the rest of the young elves stood frozen in shock, barely able to process the reality of their sudden rescue. The initial shock soon gave way to an overwhelming surge of emotion, and as tears began to flow, the heavy burden they had carried together was finally lifted. The entire elven population erupted in a collective roar of joy, celebrating their long-awaited liberation from the dragon's oppressive rule. Amidst the festivities, Kaido turned to Flora with a look of bewilderment, remarking that while their achievement seemed significant, he wondered if it truly amounted to anything more than just defeating the black trash. She clarifies that a black dragon is far from a common beast, possessing strength on par with the Demon King's elite generals, and making it nearly impossible to defeat. Upon hearing this, Kaido finally begins to understand the sheer scale of what they managed to achieve. The group was greeted by the elven elder, Melville, the leader of the Vetaphons tribe, who graciously offered them a place to rest at his home. The path eventually brought them to a massive home integrated directly into the trees, radiating a soft and mystical glow. Upon entering, he and Charlotte bowed in unison as Melville expressed the collective gratitude of his people, thanking them for saving both their settlement and the world tree from total destruction. Caught off guard by the formal display of gratitude, a flustered Kaido insisted that no thanks were necessary, explaining that his only goal had been to defeat the dragon. With a solemn expression, Melville emphasized that while Kaido might view his actions as minor, the elves saw their rescue as a monumental event and felt deeply obligated to reward him. He inquired if there was anything they needed from the elves, causing Kaido to pause as he quietly weighed his options. Casting aside his hesitation, he looked up with resolve and requested official permission to develop the borderlands. The elves were stunned by the unexpected request, leaving Melville to repeat the term, developed, in sheer confusion. Seeing their reaction, Kaido immediately backtracked, assuring them he wouldn't press the issue if it was impossible for them to achieve. After reflecting on the suggestion, Melville admitted it was a solid plan, though he noted that a powerhouse like Kaido had little reason to worry about protection, a concept that only left the warrior feeling puzzled. He then shared a fundamental belief of his people, detailing an ancient legend held by the Vetaphon elves. They believed they were entrusted with a sacred mission from the gods to guard the human realm against the threats lurking within the borderlands, a duty they considered a unique and divine responsibility. Laura turned to Kaido, skeptical of the elder's reasoning. She argued that since humans were already being forced into the borderlands, telling them they were under elven protection would only discourage them from venturing any further. To her, the entire situation felt suspicious, leaving a visibly troubled Kaido to offer nothing but a stammered apology. The elder explains his motives, revealing that the magic on the armlet was a precaution meant to keep Kaido safe from the borderlands' many threats. Although he admits the request is unusual, he acknowledges that by slaying the Black Dragon, Kaido has earned the right to develop the land, and Melville finally grants him permission to move forward. Surprised by the gesture, Kaido realized it was their way of showing gratitude and chose to accept it as a testament to the trust they placed in him. He voiced his gratitude openly, while Flora noted that he could now proceed with his plans without any further hesitation. She quietly processed the situation, skeptical of the claim that elves from the Sacred Tree Kingdom were protecting humans when every story she knew painted them as elitists who despised mankind. Her curiosity piqued. She questioned Melville about the distinction between the World Tree and their Sacred Tree, leading him to explain that they were essentially the same, as their tree was actually a sapling grown from a branch of the original World Tree. Realizing the potential, she wondered if the leaves and fruit could be harvested, and if they might be worth even more. After the elder confirmed her suspicions and offered to share, Flora shouted her acceptance in excitement, her sudden outburst catching Kaido completely off guard. Offering a knowing smile, Melville presented a small, intricately crafted vial, explaining that he would also be providing them with a secret elven medicine. Presenting the vial to Kaido, he explained that the medicine was a life crystal from the World Tree, crafted during their sacred mission and offered now as a tribute for securing their future. He hesitated to accept such a valuable gift, but Melville put his mind at ease, explaining that more medicine could be crafted as long as they continued their prayers to the World Tree. The elder urged him to take it freely, while also promising to assist in the development of the borderlands. Standing beside Charlotte, Melville pledged that the Vetaphon elves would support Lord Claire's development projects, assuring Kaido that they were ready to help whenever needed. Kaido returned the look, his expression a mix of shock and genuine gratitude as a bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He carefully accepted the crystal from Melville, offering a quiet word of thanks. As the agreement was finalized, the atmosphere turned festive, with Zaire hoisting his mug and cheering among the jubilant elves. As the energetic feast continued with tables overflowing with food, Kaido sat among the elves to enjoy a drink and some friendly conversation. He looked on at the festivities with a warm, contented smile, appearing genuinely happy to be part of the group. A few days later, a patron at an Emil village tavern shared a chilling account with his companion, recalling how he was once cornered by 5 goblins and certain he wouldn't survive. Embellishing his tale with a bit of drama, he explained how a sudden bolt of lightning had surged from behind him, striking down every goblin in a single blinding flash. As the storyteller finished his tale in wonder, he turned to face his savior and found the elf Charlotte standing there with Kaido right behind her. While walking through the village together, Kaido noted the visible improvements, sharing news from Alzum that the elves had begun entering the Borderlands forest to help protect the locals, as everyone learned to coexist in peace. With a bright smile, she noted that since the ELF situation was finally settled, they could resume development on the area, and she offered her assistance. This caught Kaido off guard, as he had assumed she would be returning home. She explained that she had grown fond of the area, as Kaido was building a sanctuary where she could finally feel at peace. It was a surprising turn of events for her. She had originally chosen this remote borderland to live in solitude, never expecting to find herself befriending villagers and elves. Resting her head against his shoulder with a peaceful expression, she shared her deep appreciation for the people of Emil village and the elves, noting that unlike those in the capital, no one here treated her with disdain. Her peaceful composure vanished in an instant as she suddenly remembered Yuka's upcoming mock battle. Realizing she had to return to the capital regardless of her plans for the church, she made her decision, and Kaido simply went along with it. His expression hardened as he absorbed her words, realizing Duke Conrad had staged this event to showcase Yuka's power to a crowd that was already betting on her failure. Noticing his unease, she checked if he was all right and assured him he wasn't forced to go. Kaido paused to reflect, admitting to himself that he truly didn't want to watch Yuka fight. Turning toward her with a resolute smile, he announced his intention to travel to the capital, stating that he needed to witness his friend's moment of bravery firsthand. Charlotte was overjoyed by the news, beaming as she insisted that he join her. Upon hearing the news of their sudden departure, Rita looked up in surprise and questioned if they were truly heading for the capital. He detailed their plans, explaining that a friend was participating in a major festival in the capital, and he wanted to take this rare opportunity to go and support him, a sentiment Rita seemed to understand. While Kaido and Charlotte finalized their plans, Rita listened with a sense of longing, admitting her own wish to visit the capital. She had traveled there once in her early childhood, but those memories had long since faded. Upon hearing this, Charlotte's eyes sparkled with excitement as she turned to Glanz, the wagon driver, to ask if Rita could accompany them. Glanz gave his immediate approval, a response that left Rita momentarily stunned by the unexpected invitation. Feeling hesitant, she expressed her worries to Kaito about the high cost of the journey, but Glanz offered a reassuring smile and promised to cover the travel expenses himself. He proposed a practical solution. Since they had time before leaving, she could craft magic tools to sell in the capital to cover her travel costs, a suggestion so unexpected that Rita questioned if he was actually serious. Charlotte stepped in to cover the lodging costs, explaining that she and Kaido had already planned to take separate rooms, which he confirmed before heading off to tend to the horses. Charlotte pulled Rita into a hug, explaining that since they had already booked 2 rooms, Rita could stay with her at no additional cost. Thrilled by the prospect of traveling with a female friend, Charlotte's infectious excitement quickly won over a flustered but appreciative Rita, who accepted the offer. Once the excitement died down, Charlotte noticed her companion's somber expression and asked what was on her mind, leading Rita to admit her fear that Kiza would be overcome with envy if he discovered she was traveling to the capital. Charlotte admitted it was a distinct possibility, prompting Kaido, who had been listening in, to suggest they invite Kiza to join them. Meanwhile, at Alzum's nearby residence, Kiza charged out into the street, shouting with a fierce sense of resolve. Kaido quickly intercepted him, struggling to restrain the frantic young man as Kiza fought against his grip, desperate not to be left behind. Kaido was startled to find Kiza's father, Alzum, standing nearby. Kiza clung tightly to Kaido's leg, praising him as the best big brother and offering his sincere thanks. While Kaido felt flustered, his mind was mostly preoccupied with the steep travel expenses to the capital. Alzum calmly questioned if his son was truly ready to leave, to which Kiza confirmed he had his father's full support. His father then loudly admitted that he, too, had once shared the dream of traveling to the capital. He explained his reasoning to Clay, noting that even with the elves' cooperation, he couldn't leave the village vulnerable. Monster activity in the nearby forest had been rising recently, a troubling shift he attributed to the rampaging black dragon, making the village's protection his absolute priority. He concluded that he wouldn't be able to leave for a while, and Kaido acknowledged the responsibilities he had to fulfill. With his stern expression finally softening, Alzum smiled and told Clay to enjoy the trip in his stead, noting that he looked forward to seeing what souvenirs they would bring back. His expression darkened as he questioned Clay about the decision to leave Charlotte behind, worried that the elf girl might be ostracized by her own people if she wasn't seen with the group. A man advised Clay to be direct or risk living with regret, and as he pondered this, the entire traveling party, Kaido, Kiza, Rita, and Charlotte, was briefly shown assembled. As the conversation ends, the scene shifts to the elven settlement, where elegant structures are seamlessly integrated into the trunks of massive ancient trees. Charlotte offered her answer with a gentle smile, making it clear that she was fully committed to the opportunity. Clay was caught off guard by her instant acceptance, realizing he had spent far too much time fearing a rejection. In that moment of shock, he finally understood that Alzum's warning had been right all along. Surprised by Charlotte's request to join them, Clay looked toward the elf elder, Melville, who was standing nearby with Sayuri. Melville gave his approval, explaining that he also had his own business to settle in the capital. Looking weary yet thankful, Melville explains his hesitation about traveling to the capital alone and invites the group to join him. Zaire enthusiastically accepts, while Clay silently notes that their party has grown to 6 people, realizing this trip will be far from ordinary. A week later, with preparations finally complete, An observer on a rooftop noted the impressive group that had been gathered for the journey to the capital. With the entire party assembled and ready for departure, Clay leads the charge alongside Rita and Charlotte, while Marquisa, Zier, and Melville follow in their wake. Grinning with confidence, Clay declares that their next destination is the capital.